You're not actually shy, a complete guide to understanding your inner world. The truth about who you really are. Let me start with something that might surprise you. You know that feeling when you walk into a room full of people and your chest tightens? When you want to say something but the words freeze in your throat? When you replay conversations in your mind for hours, analyzing every word you said, every gesture you made? You've probably called that shyness. Maybe other people have called you shy. Maybe you've even introduced yourself that way, I'm just a shy person. But here's what I need you to understand, right from the beginning, you're not actually shy. I know that sounds strange. You might be thinking, but I am shy. I've been this way my whole life. It's just who I am. And I understand why you believe that. Society has given us this convenient label, this neat little box to put ourselves in. Shy feels like an explanation. It feels like an identity. It even feels, in some way, like protection. But shyness isn't a personality trait you were born with, carved into your DNA like the color of your eyes. Shyness is something much more interesting, much more dynamic, and much more changeable than that. Shyness is a misunderstanding. It's a misunderstanding of your own inner world. It's a misunderstanding of what's actually happening beneath the surface when you feel that tightness in your chest, that fog in your mind, that urge to disappear. Let me paint you a picture. Imagine a young woman named Sarah. She's 28 years old, works in marketing, and if you asked her friends to describe her, they'd say she's thoughtful, kind, and yes, shy. Sarah has always thought of herself this way. At parties, she stands near the wall. In meetings, she prepares what she wants to say but often doesn't speak up. When someone compliments her, she deflects it awkwardly. Sarah believes this is just her nature. She's accepted it. She's built her life around it. But here's what Sarah doesn't know. Every time she feels that familiar tension before speaking up, it's not shyness activating. It's an entire cascade of emotional responses that she's never learned to identify. There's anxiety from a memory of being laughed at in 5th grade. There's a belief system that says, people won't find what I say interesting. There's a physical tension pattern she developed years ago that now triggers automatically. There's a fear of judgment that's actually fear of feeling the emotion she'd feel if someone judged her. All of this happens in less than a second. And because Sarah has never been taught to see these individual components, she experiences them as one big, overwhelming thing and calls it shyness. But what if Sarah could separate these threads? What if she could see that the tightness in her chest is just tension, and tension can be released? What if she realized that the thought, "they won't find me interesting," is just a thought, not a fact? What if she understood that the anxiety is actually just her body's alarm system being a little too sensitive, and that she could recalibrate it? If Sarah could see all of this, would she still be shy? Or would she simply be someone who sometimes feels nervous but knows exactly what to do about it? This is the journey we're about to take together. The misunderstanding, what you think is happening versus what's actually happening. Most people move through life on autopilot, never really examining what's happening inside them. They feel an emotion and think, this is just how I am. They have a reaction and assume it's inevitable, unchangeable, part of their fundamental nature. But your inner world is not a simple, solid thing. It's more like a complex ecosystem, constantly shifting, responding, adapting. And just like you can learn about any ecosystem, you can learn about this one too. When you label yourself as shy, you're collapsing an incredibly complex system into one word. You're taking hundreds of different mechanisms, thoughts, emotions, physical sensations, beliefs, memories, behavioral patterns, and treating them as if they're all the same thing. Let me break this down. Think about the last time you felt shy. Maybe it was at a social gathering, or before giving a presentation, or when meeting someone new. Close your eyes for a moment and remember it. Really feel it. Now, if I asked you to describe what shyness actually feels like, you might say things like, "My heart starts racing. I can't think of what to say. I feel like everyone's looking at me. I want to leave. My face gets hot. I feel stupid. Notice something. Every single one of these is different. They're happening in different parts of your experience. Some are physical sensations. Some are thoughts. Some are emotions. Some are impulses to act. But because they all happen together, quickly, automatically, you've learned to perceive them as one unified experience called shyness. It's like looking at a forest and just seeing green instead of recognizing the oak trees, the pine trees, the ferns, the moss, the undergrowth. They're all there, distinct and individual, but your brain has learned to simplify them into one perception. This simplification isn't your fault. It's actually a feature of how human brains work. Our minds are pattern recognition machines, always trying to make sense of the world by categorizing and labeling. It's efficient. It helped our ancestors survive. But it's also limiting. Because once you've labeled something, once you've decided, I am shy, your brain stops investigating. It thinks it already knows the answer. It stops asking questions like, what exactly am I feeling right now? Where did this reaction come from? What am I actually afraid of? What do I believe about myself in this moment? What would happen if I acted differently? These questions are the beginning of real change. These questions are the gateway to understanding your inner world, not just labeling it. Let me share another story with you. There's a man I once knew named David. David was in his mid-30s, successful in his career as a software engineer, but he struggled terribly in social situations. He'd avoid team lunches. He'd decline invitations to gatherings. When he did attend, he'd position himself near exits, always planning his escape. David had read books about shyness. He'd tried affirmations. He'd even forced himself into social situations, hoping exposure would cure him. But nothing really worked. He still felt that same crushing anxiety every time. Then one day, someone asked him a different question. Not, why are you shy, but what are you actually experiencing when you feel this way? David paused. Nobody had ever asked him that before. He started paying attention, really paying attention, to what happened inside him in social situations. And here's what he discovered. First, there was a thought, I won't know what to talk about. Then, a physical sensation, tightness in his chest and throat. Then another thought, I'll seem boring. Then an emotion, anxiety. Then another physical sensation, his hands getting clammy. Then an impulse, I should leave. And underneath all of it, a deeper belief he'd never consciously acknowledged, I'm not interesting enough for people to want to talk to me. This was revolutionary for David. Because suddenly, he wasn't dealing with this monolithic thing called shyness. He was dealing with specific thoughts, which could be questioned, specific physical sensations, which could be managed, specific beliefs, which could be examined, and specific impulses, which could be redirected. Each of these components was something he could work with. Each had its own logic, its own origin, its own solution. The thought, I won't know what to talk about, wasn't true. David actually had plenty of interesting experiences and knowledge. It was just a prediction his anxious mind was making. Once he recognized it as a prediction rather than a fact, it lost some of its power. The physical tension in his chest and throat, that was just his body's stress response. It felt overwhelming, but it was just sensation. David learned breathing techniques. He learned how to relax his muscles consciously. The sensations didn't disappear completely, but they became manageable. The belief, I'm not interesting enough. This one was older, deeper. It came from experiences in his childhood, from messages he'd absorbed about himself over years. But once David could see it clearly, he could start to question it. He could look for evidence against it. He could begin to build a new relationship with that belief. Within 6 months, David's experience of social situations had completely transformed. Not because his personality changed, but because he understood what was actually happening inside him and learned to work with it skillfully. This is what I mean when I say shyness is a misunderstanding. You're not broken. You're not flawed. You're not fundamentally different from people who seem confident and socially at ease. You're just unaware of your emotional patterns, your triggers, and the power you already have inside you. And that's what we're going to change. Not because his personality changed, but because he understood what was actually happening inside him and learned to work with it skillfully. This is what I mean when I say shyness is a misunderstanding. You're not broken. You're not flawed. You're not fundamentally different from people who seem confident and socially at ease. You're just unaware of your emotional patterns, your triggers, and the power you already have inside you. And that's what we're going to change. Not because his personality changed, but because he understood what was actually happening inside him and learned to work with it skillfully. This is what I mean when I say shyness is a misunderstanding. You're not broken. You're not flawed. You're not fundamentally different from people who seem confident and socially at ease. You're just unaware of your emotional patterns, your triggers, and the power you already have inside you. And that's what we're going to change. The foundation, what this journey is really about. This audiobook isn't a quick fix. It's not a collection of social tricks or conversation hacks, though we'll certainly cover practical techniques. It's not about turning you into someone you're not, or forcing you to become extroverted if that's not your nature. This is about something deeper and more powerful, developing a sophisticated understanding of your inner world and learning to navigate it with skill and confidence. Think of it like this: imagine you're standing in front of a control panel with hundreds of switches, dials, and buttons. For most of your life, you haven't known this control panel existed. Things just seemed to happen to you, emotions arose, thoughts appeared, reactions occurred, and you assumed you had no control over any of it. But now, imagine someone shows you this control panel and starts teaching you what each switch does. This dial controls your breathing pattern, which affects your nervous system. This button can interrupt an anxious thought loop. This switch can shift your attention from internal self-criticism to external curiosity. Suddenly, you're not at the mercy of your automatic reactions anymore. You have agency. You have options. You have power. This is what we're building together. We're going to explore 5 interconnected domains, each one essential to transforming your experience of yourself and your relationships with others. First, emotional intelligence. This is your ability to recognize, understand, and skillfully work with emotions, both your own and other. When you understand how connection actually works, conversation stops feeling like a performance and starts feeling natural. Fourth, boundaries. This is one of the most overlooked aspects of social confidence. Many people who think they're shy are actually just bad at boundaries. They don't know how to say no. They don't know how to protect their energy. They don't know where they end and others begin. Learning about boundaries will change not just your social life, but your entire relationship with yourself. Fifth, natural interaction. This is where everything comes together, the ability to move through social situations in a way that feels effortless, authentic, and genuinely you. Not performing, not hiding, not forcing. Just being present, responsive, and real. These 5 domains are deeply interconnected. Growth in one area supports growth in all the others. As your emotional intelligence develops, your social confidence naturally increases. As your conversation skills improve, boundary setting becomes easier. As you learn to interact naturally, you develop even more emotional intelligence. It's a positive spiral, each element reinforcing the others. But here's something important to understand: this journey isn't linear. You won't master one domain and then move to the next. Instead, you'll be working with all of them simultaneously, gradually deepening your understanding and skill in each area. Some days, you'll have breakthroughs. Other days, you'll feel like you're back where you started. This is normal. This is part of the process. Real growth rarely happens in straight lines. Think of learning these skills like learning to play a musical instrument. At first, everything feels awkward and mechanical. You have to think about every note, every finger placement. It doesn't feel natural at all. But with practice, patient, consistent practice, something shifts. The mechanics become automatic. You stop thinking about technique and start actually making music. You stop worrying about whether you're doing it right and start expressing something real. The same thing happens with emotional intelligence and social skills. At first, You'll be very conscious of what you're doing. You'll notice your breathing. You'll catch your thoughts. You'll deliberately choose how to respond instead of reacting automatically. It might feel awkward, even artificial. But keep going. Keep practicing. Keep bringing awareness to your inner experience. And gradually, it becomes second nature. You don't have to think about it anymore. You just naturally notice your emotions and know what to do with them. You just naturally feel confident in social situations. You just naturally connect with people in authentic ways. This is the transformation we're working toward. Why this matters: the cost of misunderstanding yourself. Before we go deeper, I want to talk about why this matters. Why invest time and energy into understanding your inner world? Why not just accept the label of shy and work around it? Because there's a cost. There's always a cost to misunderstanding yourself. The cost shows up in missed opportunities, the job you didn't apply for because it would require presenting to groups, the person you never approached because you assumed you'd have nothing interesting to say, the gathering you skipped because you told yourself you wouldn't enjoy it anyway. The cost shows up in relationships, the friendships that remain surface level because you never learned to be vulnerable, the romantic connections that never develop because you can't quite open up, the family gatherings where you sit quietly and feel invisible. The cost shows up in your sense of self, the constant background noise of self-criticism, the feeling that other people have something figured out that you don't, the exhausting effort of managing anxiety that seems to come from nowhere and overwhelm everything. But perhaps most painfully, the cost shows up in the gap between who you are and who you could be. There's a version of you that exists right now, right in this moment, underneath all the misunderstandings and misconceptions. A version of you that's curious, connected, expressive, and free. A version of you that moves through the world with ease and authenticity. That version isn't some distant ideal you have to strive for years to reach. It's already there, right now, waiting to be uncovered. Every time you operate from the belief, "I'm just shy," you're covering up that authentic self with a story. Every time you avoid a situation because of anxiety, you're reinforcing patterns that hide who you really are. Every time you silence yourself to stay safe, you're choosing the comfort of the known over the possibility of the real. I'm not saying this to make you feel bad. I'm saying it because I want you to see what's at stake. I want you to see what becomes possible when you start understanding yourself clearly. Imagine waking up tomorrow and the anxiety you usually feel about social situations is just gone. Not because you've forced it away or distracted yourself from it, but because you understand exactly what was creating it and you've addressed those root causes. Imagine walking into a room full of people and feeling genuinely curious about them instead of worried about how they're perceiving you. Imagine having a conversation where you're fully present, not rehearsing what you'll say next or replaying what you just said, but actually there, engaged, connected. Imagine setting a boundary, saying no to something that doesn't serve you, and feeling completely at peace with that decision, not guilty, not anxious, just clear. Imagine being yourself, fully, without apology or pretense, and having that feel completely natural. This isn't fantasy. This is what becomes available when you understand your inner world and learn to work with it skillfully. The path forward, what you can expect. So where do we go from here? Over the course of this audiobook, we're going to take a deep dive into each of the 5 domains I mentioned: emotional intelligence, social confidence, conversation skills, boundaries, and natural interaction. In each section, I'll share concepts, frameworks, and practices. But more than that, I'll share stories, real examples of people who've walked this path, who've struggled with the same things you struggle with, who've discovered the same truths you're about to discover. We'll explore questions like: what actually is an emotion, and how do you work with it skillfully? Where does social anxiety really come from, and what can you do about it? How do confident people actually think, and can you learn to think that way too? What makes some conversations flow naturally while others feel forced? Why do some people seem to have endless things to talk about? How do you balance being open and authentic with protecting your energy? What does it actually mean to be yourself, and how do you do it in practice? These aren't simple questions with quick answers. Each one opens up into layers of understanding. But that's what makes this journey so rich, so transformative. I'll also give you practical exercises and experiments, Things you can actually do in your daily life to develop these skills. Because understanding conceptually is valuable, but real transformation comes from practice, from actually applying these ideas in real situations and learning from your experience. Some of these exercises will feel easy, even natural. Others will push you outside your comfort zone. That's by design. Growth happens at the edge of comfort, in that space where you're challenged but not overwhelmed. Throughout this journey, I want you to approach yourself with curiosity and compassion. You're not trying to fix something broken. You're exploring something complex and learning to work with it skillfully. There will be moments of insight, those aha moments where something suddenly makes sense in a way it never has before. There will also be moments of frustration, where old patterns reassert themselves and you wonder if you're making any progress at all. Both are part of the process. Both are valuable. The insights give you new understanding and possibilities. The frustrations show you exactly where your work is. They're not signs of failure but rather invitations to go deeper, to understand more clearly. A new beginning, choosing to see clearly. So let's come back to where we started. You're not actually shy. What you've been calling shyness is actually a complex constellation of thoughts, emotions, physical sensations, beliefs, and patterns, all of which can be understood, all of which can be worked with, all of which can change. This doesn't mean change is easy. It doesn't mean you'll read this audiobook and suddenly feel completely different. Real, lasting transformation takes time. It takes practice. It takes patience with yourself. But it is possible. And it starts with seeing clearly. It starts with asking, what's actually happening inside me, instead of accepting, I'm just shy. It starts with curiosity instead of judgment. It starts with recognizing that you already have everything you need, you just need to understand how to access it. Right now, in this moment, I invite you to let go of the label. Let go of shy as an identity, as an explanation, as a limitation. You don't need it anymore. Instead, open yourself to possibility. Open yourself to the journey of truly understanding your inner world. Open yourself to discovering the capable, confident, connected person you actually are, underneath all the misunderstandings and misconceptions. This is your journey. Nobody else can take it for you. But you don't have to take it alone. I'll be here, guiding you, sharing what I know, offering perspectives and practices that can help. And here's what I know for certain, from years of working with people on this exact journey, the other side is worth it. The freedom, the confidence, the authentic connection, it's all real, it's all achievable, and it's all waiting for you. So take a breath. Notice how you're feeling right now. Notice any resistance, any skepticism, any hope, any anxiety. All of it is welcome. All of it is part of where you are right now. And from where you are right now, we're going to begin moving toward where you want to be. Not by becoming someone different, but by understanding, finally, who you actually are. Let's begin. Chapter 1, Know Yourself, the foundation of everything. The moment everything changes. There's a moment that changes everything. It's not dramatic. It's not loud. It happens quietly, often when you least expect it. It's the moment when you truly see yourself. Not the story you tell about yourself. Not the label others have given you. Not the mask you wear or the role you play. But the actual, real you, with all your patterns, all your quirks, all your hidden mechanisms and unconscious habits. This moment of clear seeing is where transformation begins. Not in trying harder, not in forcing yourself to be different, not in following some social script. But in simply understanding what's actually there. Let me tell you about Maya. Maya was 32 when she first came to understand this principle. She'd spent most of her adult life believing she was fundamentally flawed in social situations. At work events, she'd rehearse conversations in her head for hours beforehand. At parties, she'd feel a crushing weight in her chest. Meeting new people filled her with dread. She tried everything. Positive affirmations. Visualization exercises. Even medication for a while. Nothing seemed to work. The anxiety always came back. Then one evening, instead of fighting the anxiety, she did something different. She got curious about it. She sat down with a journal and started writing. Not about why she was anxious or how to fix it. Just what was actually happening inside her. When I think about going to the networking event tomorrow, she wrote, my stomach tightens first. Then I see images of myself standing alone while everyone else talks. Then I hear my own voice in my head saying, you never know what to say. Then my shoulders tense up. Then I feel this urge to cancel, to make up an excuse. She kept going, getting more and more specific. She noticed that the anxiety wasn't one solid thing, it was a sequence. First physical sensation, then mental image, then critical thought, then more physical tension, then behavioral impulse. This was revolutionary. Because once Maya could see the sequence, she could work with each part individually. The physical tension. She could breathe through that. The mental images. She could question whether they were predictions or memories. The critical thought. She could examine whether it was actually true. Within weeks, Maya's experience of social situations began to shift. Not because the situations changed, but because she understood what was happening inside her. She stopped being at the mercy of this mysterious thing called social anxiety and started working skillfully with specific, manageable components. This is the power of self-awareness. This is why knowing yourself changes everything. What self-awareness actually means. Most people think they know themselves. They can tell you their favorite foods, their political opinions, their career goals. They might even describe their personality, I'm introverted, I'm creative, I'm shy. But this isn't real self-awareness. This is self-concept, the story you tell about who you are. Real self-awareness is something different. It's the ability to see yourself in real time, moment by moment, without the filter of your self-concept. It's noticing what's actually happening inside you right now, not what you think should be happening or what usually happens. Let me break this down into layers, because self-awareness operates at different depths. The first layer is behavioral awareness. This is noticing what you actually do, not what you think you do. For example, you might believe you're a good listener, but if you paid attention, you might notice you're actually planning your response while the other person is still talking. You might think you're open to new people, but you might notice you unconsciously position yourself away from strangers at gatherings. There's often a gap between who we think we are and what we actually do. Closing this gap starts with honest observation. The second layer is emotional awareness. This is recognizing what you're feeling in the moment, with precision. Not just, I feel bad, but I'm feeling a combination of anxiety, frustration, and underneath that, sadness. Not just, I'm nervous, but there's tightness in my chest, my thoughts are racing, and I'm feeling an urge to escape. Most people are surprisingly bad at this. We're taught to suppress emotions, to soldier through them, to distract ourselves from them. We're not taught to simply be with them, to feel them clearly, to understand their texture and message. The third layer is cognitive awareness. This is noticing your thoughts as thoughts, not as truth. It's catching yourself in the middle of a thought pattern and recognizing, oh, that's the I'm not good enough story again, or that's my catastrophic thinking pattern kicking in. When you can see your thoughts this way, they lose some of their power over you. They're no longer commands you must obey or truths you must believe. They're just mental events, arising and passing, like clouds moving across the sky. The fourth layer is pattern awareness. This is seeing the recurring themes in your experience, the situations that always trigger you, the types of people you always react to in certain ways, the emotional loops you get caught in again and again. These patterns aren't random. They have origins. They serve functions, even if those functions are outdated. Understanding your patterns is like finding the source code of your behavior. The deepest layer is belief awareness. This is recognizing the fundamental assumptions you carry about yourself, other people, and the world, assumptions so deep you don't even realize they're assumptions. You think they're just reality. Beliefs like, I'm not interesting, people are judgmental, I have to be perfect to be accepted, showing weakness is dangerous. These beliefs operate in the background, shaping every social interaction without you even knowing they're there. When you become aware of these beliefs, when you can see them clearly and question them, you gain access to a level of freedom you didn't know was possible. Why most people don't really know themselves? If self-awareness is so powerful, why don't more people have it? Why do so many of us move through life on autopilot, reacting from unconscious patterns, repeating the same mistakes? There are several reasons. First, we're not taught how. Think about your education. You learned math, history, science. But did anyone ever teach you how to understand your emotions? How to observe your thought patterns? How to examine your beliefs? Probably not. We're taught everything except how to understand our own minds. Second, it can be uncomfortable. Real self-awareness means seeing parts of yourself you might not like. The judgmental thoughts you have about others. The way you sabotage yourself. The patterns of avoidance or aggression or people-pleasing. It's easier to stay on the surface, to maintain the image of who you think you are, than to look honestly at who you actually are. Third, we're distracted. Modern life is designed to keep you externally focused. Social media, entertainment, work, endless information streams. There's always something pulling your attention outward. Turning that attention inward, sitting with yourself, observing your inner world, this requires intentional effort. Fourth, we're defended. Your psyche has defense mechanisms that protect you from seeing certain things about yourself. Denial, rationalization, projection, these aren't character flaws, they're automatic processes that shield you from psychological pain. But they also shield you from truth. Breaking through these defenses, gently and with compassion, is part of developing self-awareness. Let me share another story. There was a man named James who prided himself on being easygoing and friendly. He genuinely believed this about himself. But if you watched him in social situations, you'd notice something different. Whenever someone disagreed with him, his jaw would tighten. His voice would get slightly sharper. He'd subtly dismiss the other person's perspective. And afterward, he'd tell stories about how unreasonable that person was. James had no awareness of this pattern. If you'd pointed it out, he would have been shocked, maybe defensive. No, I'm not like that. I'm open-minded. I respect different opinions. But one day, someone he trusted gave him honest feedback. They did it with care, with specific examples, with genuine concern for his well-being. And something in James cracked open. He started paying attention. He started noticing the physical sensation that arose when someone disagreed with him, that tightness in his jaw, that spike of defensive energy. He started catching his subtle dismissive comments. He started seeing the stories he told himself about others. It was humbling. It was uncomfortable. But it was also liberating. Because once James could see this pattern, he could work with it. He could feel the defensive reaction arising and choose not to act on it. He could question his harsh judgments of others. He could actually become the open-minded person he'd always believed he was. This is what self-awareness makes possible. Not perfection, but conscious choice. Not the elimination of unwanted patterns, but the ability to work with them skillfully. Noticing your emotional patterns. Let's get practical. How do you actually develop self-awareness? Where do you start? The most accessible entry point is emotional awareness. Your emotions are always with you, always communicating, always offering information about your inner state. Learning to read them is like learning a new language, one that's been trying to speak to you your whole life. Here's the thing most people don't understand about emotions: they're not problems to be solved. They're signals to be understood. When you feel anxiety before a social event, that's not a malfunction. It's information. Your system is detecting something it perceives as a threat and mobilizing resources to deal with it. The threat might not be real, it might be based on outdated beliefs or past experiences, but the emotion is still valid communication from your inner world. When you feel anger during a conversation, that's information too. Something has crossed a boundary, violated a value, or triggered a sense of injustice. The anger is telling you something matters to you. When you feel sadness after a social interaction, that's also meaningful. Maybe you're grieving a connection that didn't happen. Maybe you're feeling the pain of not being seen. Maybe you're mourning the gap between how you showed up and how you wanted to show up. Every emotion has a message. But you can only receive the message if you're paying attention. So how do you pay attention? Start with the body. Emotions aren't just mental experiences, they're physical. Anxiety lives in your chest and throat. Anger burns in your belly and jaw. Sadness weighs in your shoulders and eyes. Before you can even name an emotion, you can feel it in your body. Practice this, several times a day. Stop and scan your body. Where are you holding tension? What sensations are present? Don't try to change anything, just notice. Then add language. Once you feel something in your body, try to name it. Not with vague terms like fine or okay or stressed. Get specific. I'm feeling anxious and beneath that, lonely. I'm feeling frustrated and also disappointed. I'm feeling excited but also vulnerable. The more precise your emotional vocabulary, the better you can understand what's happening inside you. Then track patterns. Start noticing when certain emotions arise. What triggers your anxiety? What situations bring up anger? What interactions leave you feeling depleted versus energized? You might discover that your social anxiety isn't universal, it's specific to certain types of situations or people. You might notice that you feel confident in small groups but overwhelmed in large ones. You might realize that you're fine with strangers but anxious around people you want to impress. These patterns reveal important information about your needs, your sensitivities, your edges. Finally, get curious about the deeper layers. What are your emotions trying to protect you from? What do they assume about the world? What do they believe about you? Often, beneath social anxiety is a belief about judgment. Beneath anger is a belief about fairness. Beneath sadness is a belief about belonging. When you can see these beliefs clearly, you can start to question them, to update them, to choose whether to keep operating from them. Understanding your strengths and blind spots. Self-awareness isn't just about seeing your challenges. It's equally about recognizing your strengths, the things you're naturally good at, the qualities that serve you, the aspects of yourself that are genuinely valuable. Many people who struggle socially have a distorted view of themselves. They see only their weaknesses. They compare themselves to others' strengths. They discount their own gifts. But here's the truth, you have strengths. Real ones. Specific ones. Strengths that others would value if you showed them. Maybe you're a deep listener. Not everyone is. Most people listen just enough to formulate their response. But you really hear people. You pick up on nuances. You remember details. This is a profound gift. Maybe you're thoughtful. You consider different perspectives. You think before you speak. You care about understanding things deeply. In a world of hot takes and shallow interactions, this is valuable. Maybe you're empathetic. You feel what others feel. You pick up on unspoken emotions. You create safety for people to be vulnerable. This makes you someone others naturally want to be around. Maybe you're curious. You ask real questions. You're genuinely interested in people's stories. You see beneath surfaces. This creates connection in ways that smooth social skills never could. Whatever your strengths are, they're there. But if you're not aware of them, if you're so focused on what you think you lack that you can't see what you have, you'll never leverage them. At the same time, we all have blind spots, aspects of ourselves we don't see clearly, ways we impact others without realizing it, patterns we're caught in without knowing it. Your blind spots aren't character flaws. They're just areas where you lack perspective. And the only way to illuminate them is through honest self-observation and, sometimes, feedback from others. Common blind spots for people who think they're shy include Underestimating your impact. You might think you're invisible in social situations, but others might experience you as present, thoughtful, even magnetic in your quiet way. Not recognizing your withdrawal pattern. You might think you're just being reserved, but others experience it as distance or disinterest. You're protecting yourself, but they don't know that. Missing your own judgment. You might pride yourself on being accepting, but internally, you're constantly judging others, which creates a subtle barrier to real connection. Not seeing how much energy you spend managing others' perceptions. You think you're just being careful, but you're actually in a constant state of performance anxiety, which exhausts you and prevents authentic presence. The path forward isn't to judge yourself for these blind spots. It's to bring them into awareness so you can work with them consciously. The beliefs that sabotage your social presence. Now we come to perhaps the most important aspect of self-awareness, understanding the beliefs that shape your experience. Beliefs are powerful. They're not just thoughts you have, they're filters through which you perceive reality. They determine what you notice, how you interpret it, and how you respond. If you believe people are generally critical, you'll notice criticism everywhere. You'll interpret neutral comments as judgments. You'll brace yourself defensively in every interaction. If you believe, I have to be perfect to be accepted, you'll monitor yourself constantly. You'll replay conversations endlessly. You'll feel crushing pressure in social situations. If you believe, showing who I really am is dangerous, you'll keep yourself hidden. You'll wear masks. You'll never experience the relief and joy of being genuinely seen. These beliefs aren't usually conscious. You don't walk around thinking, I believe people are critical. The belief operates automatically, in the background, shaping your experience without your awareness. But once you see a belief clearly, once you can recognize it operating, you have a choice. You can question it. You can test it. You can choose whether to keep operating from it. Common limiting beliefs that create social difficulty include: I'm not interesting enough. People don't really want to hear what I have to say. If I'm myself, people will reject me. Social ease is something you either have or you don't. Everyone else knows something I don't. I'm fundamentally different from other people. Each of these beliefs creates specific patterns of behavior. Each one can be examined, questioned, and gradually released. The practice is simple but profound. Notice when a belief is operating. Name it. Ask yourself, is this actually true? What evidence supports it? What evidence contradicts it? Where did this belief come from? Is it serving me now? You don't have to argue yourself out of the belief. Just see it clearly. Hold it lightly. Create some space around it. Over time, as you question these beliefs and gather evidence against them, they naturally loosen their grip. The goal is clarity, not perfection. As we close this chapter, I want to emphasize something crucial. The goal of self-awareness isn't perfection. It's clarity. You're not trying to eliminate all anxiety, all self-doubt, all social awkwardness. You're trying to see yourself clearly, patterns, triggers, strengths, weaknesses, beliefs, and all. With clarity comes freedom. Not the freedom from ever feeling uncomfortable, but the freedom to choose how you respond to discomfort. Not the freedom from fear, but the freedom to act despite fear. The more you see yourself honestly, the easier everything else becomes. Social skills become learnable instead of mysterious. Confidence becomes buildable instead of innate. Connection becomes possible instead of terrifying. This is the foundation. Everything we'll explore in future chapters: emotional intelligence, conversation skills, boundaries, natural presence, all of it rests on this foundation of knowing yourself. So start here. Start with curiosity about your inner world. Start with honest observation. Start with the willingness to see yourself clearly, without judgment, without the need to be different than you are. Because here's what I've learned after years of working with people on this journey: the moment you truly see yourself, the moment you understand what's actually happening inside you, shyness begins to fade. Not all at once. Not completely. But gradually, steadily, reliably. It loses its power because you understand its mechanisms. It becomes manageable because you know how to work with each component. And in that clarity, in that understanding, you discover something beautiful: you were never fundamentally broken. You were just operating from incomplete information about yourself. Now the information is becoming complete. Now you're beginning to truly know yourself. And everything changes from here. Chapter 2: Understand Your Emotions, Mastering Your Inner World. The world beneath the surface. Imagine you're standing at the edge of an ocean. On the surface, you see waves, some gentle, some turbulent, some crashing with overwhelming force. Most people spend their entire lives reacting to these waves, trying to calm them, trying to avoid them, or getting swept away by them. But the waves are just the surface. Beneath them lies an entire world: currents, depths, ecosystems, patterns. The person who understands the ocean doesn't just react to the waves. They understand what creates them, how they move, how to navigate them. Your emotional world is like this ocean. The feelings you experience: anxiety before a social event, frustration during a conversation, sadness after a rejection, these are the waves. But beneath them lies something far more complex and far more interesting. This chapter is about diving beneath the surface. It's about understanding the world that creates your emotional experience, so you can navigate it with skill instead of just reacting to whatever arises. Let me tell you about a moment that changed everything for a woman named Rachel. Rachel was 29, working in finance, and she'd spent most of her adult life feeling ambushed by her emotions. They seemed to come from nowhere: sudden waves of anxiety that would make her heart race, surges of anger that would catch her off guard, moments of sadness that would descend like a fog. She thought this was just how emotions worked. They happened to you. You couldn't control them. You just had to endure them. Then one day, her therapist asked her a simple question: what were you thinking right before you felt anxious? Rachel paused. She'd never considered this before. She'd always experienced the emotion as the starting point, as if it just appeared fully formed. But when she thought back, she realized there was always something before the emotion. A thought. An image. A memory. A prediction. Right before the anxiety, she'd thought, what if I say something stupid? Right before the anger, she'd interpreted someone's comment as dismissive. Right before the sadness, she'd compared herself to someone else and found herself lacking. The emotions weren't coming from nowhere. They were responses. And if they were responses, that meant there was something she could work with. This realization opened an entirely new way of relating to her emotional world. Instead of being at the mercy of these mysterious forces, she could start to understand them, to see their patterns, to work with them skillfully. This is what we're going to explore together. Why emotions feel overwhelming. Let's start with the most common question people ask about emotions: why do they feel so overwhelming? You're having a normal day, going about your business, and then suddenly your chest tightens. Your thoughts start racing. Your body floods with sensation. Everything feels urgent, intense, almost unbearable. Or maybe it's not sudden. Maybe it's a slow build, a gradual accumulation of tension, irritation, or heaviness that eventually reaches a breaking point. Either way, the feeling is the same: this is too much. I can't handle this. I need it to stop. But here's what most people don't understand: emotions don't feel overwhelming because they're inherently too big or too powerful. They feel overwhelming because of how you relate to them. Think about it this way. Imagine you're in a small room, and someone starts playing loud music. If you resist the music, if you fight against it, if you tense up and try to block it out, the experience becomes torturous. The music fills your awareness. It's all you can focus on. It feels unbearable. But what if you stopped resisting? What if you simply let the music be there, without fighting it, without trying to change it? The volume doesn't change. But your experience of it transforms completely. The same thing happens with emotions. When you resist an emotion, when you fight against it or try to suppress it, you create a second layer of suffering on top of the original feeling. You feel anxiety, and then you feel anxious about feeling anxious. You feel anger, and then you feel guilty about feeling angry. You feel sadness, and then you feel ashamed about feeling sad. This resistance is what makes emotions feel overwhelming. Not the emotion itself, but your relationship with it. There's another reason emotions feel so big: you experience them as unified blocks instead of as collections of components. When you say, "I'm anxious," you're describing something that feels like one solid, massive thing. But anxiety isn't one thing. It's actually a combination of physical sensations, tight chest, rapid heartbeat, shallow breathing. Thoughts, predictions of what might go wrong. Impulses, urges to escape or avoid. Images, mental pictures of feared outcomes. Behavioral patterns, checking, rehearsing, seeking reassurance. Each of these components is manageable on its own. But when you experience them all together, blurred into one undifferentiated mass called anxiety, they feel overwhelming. Let me share the story of Michael, a software developer who used to have panic attacks in meetings. For years, Michael experienced these attacks as sudden, unpredictable events. One moment he'd be sitting in a conference room, the next moment he'd be drowning in panic, heart pounding, thoughts spinning, desperate to escape. Then someone taught him to slow down and notice the individual components. The next time he felt panic rising, instead of reacting to it as one big thing, he started cataloging what was actually happening. My heart is beating fast. Physical sensation. I'm thinking everyone will notice I'm panicking. Thought. I'm imagining myself freezing up when asked a question. Mental image. I want to leave the room. My breathing is shallow. Something remarkable happened. By breaking the panic into components, by seeing each piece separately, the overwhelming quality began to dissolve. Each individual component was something he could work with. He could slow his breathing. He could question the thought. He could choose not to act on the impulse to leave. The mental image was just an image, not a prediction. The panic didn't disappear completely, but it stopped being overwhelming. It became manageable. And within a few months, the attacks stopped happening altogether. This is the power of understanding your emotions with precision instead of treating them as monolithic forces. How emotions influence your decisions. Most people think they make decisions rationally, logically, based on facts and careful consideration. But the truth is far more interesting: your emotions are involved in every decision you make, whether you realize it or not. This isn't a flaw. It's actually how your brain is designed to work. Your emotional system is constantly evaluating your environment, your options, your potential actions. It's asking, is this safe? Is this rewarding? Is this threatening? Is this aligned with my values? And it communicates its assessments through feelings. When you're deciding whether to go to a social event, you might think you're making a rational choice based on scheduling and energy levels. But beneath that, your emotional system is running calculations. It's remembering past social events, the ones that felt awkward, the ones where you felt excluded, the ones where you shined. It's predicting what this event might be like. It's assessing whether the potential reward is worth the potential risk. And it delivers its conclusion as a feeling: dread, excitement, ambivalence, curiosity. The problem isn't that emotions influence your decisions. The problem is when they do so unconsciously, when you don't realize what's happening. Here's a common pattern: you receive an invitation to a gathering. Immediately, before you consciously think about it, anxiety arises. Your body tenses. Your mind starts generating reasons why you can't go: you're tired, you have work to do, you don't really know anyone there. These reasons feel rational. They feel like the real reasons you're declining. But actually, they're rationalization, your conscious mind creating logical-sounding explanations for a decision your emotional system already made. The anxiety arose first, based on past experiences and current beliefs. And then your thinking mind generated justifications for avoiding the thing that triggered the anxiety. This happens constantly, in countless small decisions throughout your day. And it keeps you stuck in patterns. If anxiety always gets veto power over social decisions, you'll keep avoiding situations. If anger automatically triggers defensive reactions, you'll keep damaging relationships. If shame makes you hide parts of yourself, you'll never experience authentic connection. So how do you change this? Not by eliminating emotions from your decision-making process. That's impossible and undesirable. But by becoming aware of how emotions are influencing you, and creating space to choose how you respond. Let me introduce you to a simple practice that changes everything. When you notice an emotion arising in response to a decision, pause. Just for a moment. Don't immediately act on it or suppress it. Just notice it's there. I'm feeling anxious about this invitation. Then get curious. Ask yourself, what is this emotion trying to protect me from? What past experience is informing this reaction? What would happen if I acted differently than this emotion is urging me to? What do I actually want, beneath the fear or discomfort? This creates space. Space between the feeling and the action. Space where conscious choice becomes possible. You might still decide to decline the invitation. But now you're choosing based on fuller information, not just automatic emotional avoidance. And sometimes, you might choose differently, to attend despite the anxiety, because you recognize that the anxiety is based on outdated predictions, not current reality. A man named David used this practice to transform his career. For years, he'd been turning down opportunities for advancement because they involved public speaking. Every time an opportunity arose, anxiety would flood his system, and he'd decline. He told himself he was being realistic about his limitations. But when he started examining his decision-making process, he realized he was letting fear make all his choices. The next time an opportunity arose, he noticed the anxiety but didn't let it be the final word. He asked himself, what do I actually want? What matters to me beyond this fear? And he realized, he wanted to grow. He wanted to have impact. He wanted to challenge himself. These values mattered more than comfort. So he said yes, despite the anxiety. And while the experience was uncomfortable, it wasn't catastrophic. And the more he practiced acting from his values rather than from his fears, the more his life opened up. This is what it means to have emotions inform your decisions without controlling them. The difference between suppression and regulation. Now we come to one of the most important distinctions in emotional work, the difference between suppression and regulation. Most people, when they feel an uncomfortable emotion, try to suppress it. They push it down, distract themselves from it, pretend it's not there. They've learned that showing emotions is weak or inappropriate, so they've become experts at hiding them, from others and even from themselves. Suppression looks like forcing a smile when you're sad. Telling yourself, don't be ridiculous, when you feel afraid. Busying yourself with work or entertainment to avoid feeling. Using substances to numb uncomfortable emotions. Minimizing your feelings, it's not a big deal, I'm fine. Here's the problem with suppression, it doesn't work. Not in the long term. Suppressed emotions don't disappear. They go underground. They leak out in other ways: irritability, physical tension, anxiety, depression, sudden outbursts. They accumulate pressure until something triggers a release, often in ways that surprise and overwhelm you. Think of it like holding a beach ball underwater. It takes constant effort. It's exhausting. And the moment you relax your grip, the ball shoots up to the surface with force. But there's an alternative to suppression. It's called regulation. Regulation isn't about eliminating emotions or hiding them. It's about managing them skillfully, working with them, guiding them toward healthy expression. Regulation looks like feeling the emotion fully, in your body, without judgment. Understanding what triggered it and what it's trying to tell you. Choosing how and when to express it, in ways that serve you. Using techniques to modulate intensity when emotions become overwhelming. Allowing emotions to move through you naturally rather than getting stuck. A woman named Lisa discovered this difference in a powerful way. She'd spent her whole life suppressing anger. She'd learned early that anger wasn't acceptable, especially for women, especially in her family. So whenever she felt angry, she'd push it down, smile, be agreeable. But the anger didn't go away. It turned into chronic tension headaches. It came out as passive-aggressive comments. It built into resentment toward everyone in her life. When Lisa finally learned about regulation, she started a different practice. When anger arose, instead of suppressing it, she'd acknowledge it. I'm feeling angry right now. Then she'd feel it in her body, the heat in her chest, the tension in her jaw. She'd let it be there without acting on it impulsively or pushing it away. Then she'd get curious. What boundary was crossed? What matters to me that isn't being honored? And finally, she'd choose how to respond. Sometimes that meant speaking up assertively. Sometimes it meant setting a boundary. Sometimes it meant realizing the anger was disproportionate and doing some deeper work on old wounds. The anger didn't become a problem anymore. It became information. It became energy she could work with instead of suppress. This is the path forward, not suppression, but skillful regulation. Tools for working with emotions. Let's get practical. How do you actually regulate emotions when they arise? What can you do in the moment when anxiety is spiking, anger is building, or sadness is descending? First tool, grounding. When emotions feel overwhelming, you're usually caught in your thoughts, spinning in worries about the future or ruminating about the past. Grounding brings you back to the present moment, to physical reality, to right now. Simple grounding practices. Notice 5 things you can see, 4 you can hear, 3 you can touch, 2 you can smell, 1 you can taste. Feel your feet on the ground, press them firmly down, notice the sensation of contact. Hold something cold or textured, notice every detail of the sensation. Name where you are, what day it is, what you're doing, speaking it aloud. Grounding interrupts the emotional spiral by redirecting your attention from thoughts to sensations. Second tool, breathing. Your breath and your emotional state are intimately connected. When you're anxious, your breathing becomes shallow and rapid. When you're angry, it becomes sharp and fast. When you're sad, it becomes restricted and irregular. But here's the powerful part, the connection works both ways. You can change your emotional state by changing your breathing. Try this: breathe in for a count of 4, hold for 4, breathe out for 6. The longer exhale activates your parasympathetic nervous system, your body's calming mechanism. Do this for just 2 minutes when you feel emotion rising, and you'll notice a shift. Third tool, naming. Research shows that simply labeling an emotion reduces its intensity. When you think, I'm feeling anxious, the prefrontal cortex, thinking brain, becomes more active, and the amygdala, emotional center, becomes less reactive. Practice getting specific with your naming. I'm feeling anxious and beneath that, vulnerable. I'm feeling angry and also disappointed. Fourth tool, mindful observation. Instead of being swept away by an emotion, practice observing it with curiosity, as if you're a scientist studying an interesting phenomenon. Interesting. Anxiety is here. How emotions influence your decisions. Most people think they make decisions rationally, logically, based on facts and careful consideration. But the truth is far more interesting. Your emotions are involved in every decision you make, whether you realize it or not. This isn't a flaw. It's actually how your brain is designed to work. Your emotional system is constantly evaluating your environment, your options, your potential actions. It's asking, is this safe? Is this rewarding? Is this threatening? Is this aligned with my values? And it communicates its assessments through feelings. When you're deciding whether to go to a social event, you might think you're making a rational choice based on scheduling and energy levels. But beneath that, your emotional system is running calculations. It's remembering past social events, the ones that felt awkward, the ones where you felt excluded, the ones where you shined. It's predicting what this event might be like. It's assessing whether the potential reward is worth the potential risk. And it delivers its conclusion as a feeling: dread, excitement, ambivalence, curiosity. The problem isn't that emotions influence your decisions. The problem is when they do so unconsciously, when you don't realize what's happening. Here's a common pattern: you receive an invitation to a gathering. Immediately, before you consciously think about it, anxiety arises. Your body tenses. Your mind starts generating reasons why you can't go: you're tired, you have work to do, you don't really know anyone there. These reasons feel rational. They feel like the real reasons you're declining. But actually, they're rationalization, your conscious mind creating logical-sounding explanations for a decision your emotional system already made. The anxiety arose first, based on past experiences and current beliefs. And then your thinking mind generated justifications for avoiding the thing that triggered the anxiety. This happens constantly, in countless small decisions throughout your day. And it keeps you stuck in patterns. If anxiety always gets veto power over social decisions, you'll keep avoiding situations. If anger automatically triggers defensive reactions, you'll keep damaging relationships. If shame makes you hide parts of yourself, you'll never experience authentic connection. So how do you change this? Not by eliminating emotions from your decision-making process. That's impossible and undesirable. But by becoming aware of how emotions are influencing you, and creating space to choose how you respond. Let me introduce you to a simple practice that changes everything. When you notice an emotion arising in response to a decision, pause. Just for a moment. Don't immediately act on it or suppress it. Just notice it's there. I'm feeling anxious about this invitation. Then get curious. Ask yourself, what is this emotion trying to protect me from? What past experience is informing this reaction? What would happen if I acted differently than this emotion is urging me to? What do I actually want, beneath the fear or discomfort? This creates space. Space between the feeling and the action. Space where conscious choice becomes possible. You might still decide to decline the invitation. But now you're choosing based on fuller information, not just automatic emotional avoidance. And sometimes, you might choose differently, to attend despite the anxiety, because you recognize that the anxiety is based on outdated predictions, not current reality. A man named David used this practice to transform his career. For years, he'd been turning down opportunities for advancement because they involved public speaking. Every time an opportunity arose, anxiety would flood his system, and he'd decline. He told himself he was being realistic about his limitations. But when he started examining his decision-making process, he realized he was letting fear make all his choices. The next time an opportunity arose, he noticed the anxiety but didn't let it be the final word. He asked himself, what do I actually want? What matters to me beyond this fear? And he realized, he wanted to grow. He wanted to have impact. He wanted to challenge himself. These values mattered more than comfort. So he said yes, despite the anxiety. And while the experience was uncomfortable, it wasn't catastrophic. And the more he practiced acting from his values rather than from his fears, the more his life opened up. This is what it means to have emotions inform your decisions without controlling them. The difference between suppression and regulation. Now we come to one of the most important distinctions in emotional work, the difference between suppression and regulation. Most people, when they feel an uncomfortable emotion, try to suppress it. They push it down, distract themselves from it, pretend it's not there. They've learned that showing emotions is weak or inappropriate, so they've become experts at hiding them, from others and even from themselves. Suppression looks like forcing a smile when you're sad. Telling yourself, don't be ridiculous, when you feel afraid. Busying yourself with work or entertainment to avoid feeling. Using substances to numb uncomfortable emotions. Minimizing your feelings, it's not a big deal, I'm fine. Here's the problem with suppression, it doesn't work. Not in the long term. Suppressed emotions don't disappear. They go underground. They leak out in other ways: irritability, physical tension, anxiety, depression, sudden outbursts. They accumulate pressure until something triggers a release, often in ways that surprise and overwhelm you. Think of it like holding a beach ball underwater. It takes constant effort. It's exhausting. And the moment you relax your grip, the ball shoots up to the surface with force. But there's an alternative to suppression. It's called regulation. Regulation isn't about eliminating emotions or hiding them. It's about managing them skillfully, working with them, guiding them toward healthy expression. Regulation looks like feeling the emotion fully, in your body, without judgment. understanding what triggered it and what it's trying to tell you. Choosing how and when to express it, in ways that serve you. Using techniques to modulate intensity when emotions become overwhelming. Allowing emotions to move through you naturally rather than getting stuck. A woman named Lisa discovered this difference in a powerful way. She'd spent her whole life suppressing anger. She'd learned early that anger wasn't acceptable, especially for women, especially in her family. So whenever she felt angry, she'd push it down, smile, be agreeable. But the anger didn't go away. It turned into chronic tension headaches. It came out as passive-aggressive comments. It built into resentment toward everyone in her life. When Lisa finally learned about regulation, she started a different practice. When anger arose, instead of suppressing it, she'd acknowledge it. I'm feeling angry right now. Then she'd feel it in her body, the heat in her chest, the tension in her jaw. She'd let it be there without acting on it impulsively or pushing it away. Then she'd get curious. What boundary was crossed? What matters to me that isn't being honored? And finally, she'd choose how to respond. Sometimes that meant speaking up assertively. Sometimes it meant setting a boundary. Sometimes it meant realizing the anger was disproportionate and doing some deeper work on old wounds. The anger didn't become a problem anymore. It became information. It became energy she could work with instead of suppress. This is the path forward, not suppression, but skillful regulation. Tools for working with emotions. Let's get practical. How do you actually regulate emotions when they arise? What can you do in the moment when anxiety is spiking, anger is building, or sadness is descending? First tool, grounding. When emotions feel overwhelming, you're usually caught in your thoughts, spinning in worries about the future or ruminating about the past. Grounding brings you back to the present moment, to physical reality, to right now. Simple grounding practices. Notice 5 things you can see, 4 you can hear, 3 you can touch, 2 you can smell, 1 you can taste. Feel your feet on the ground, press them firmly down, notice the sensation of contact. Hold something cold or textured, notice every detail of the sensation. Name where you are, what day it is, what you're doing, speaking it aloud. Grounding interrupts the emotional spiral by redirecting your attention from thoughts to sensations. Second tool, breathing. Your breath and your emotional state are intimately connected. When you're anxious, your breathing becomes shallow and rapid. When you're angry, it becomes sharp and fast. When you're sad, it becomes restricted and irregular. But here's the powerful part, the connection works both ways. You can change your emotional state by changing your breathing. Try this: breathe in for a count of 4, hold for 4, breathe out for 6. The longer exhale activates your parasympathetic nervous system, your body's calming mechanism. Do this for just 2 minutes when you feel emotion rising, and you'll notice a shift. Third tool, naming. Research shows that simply labeling an emotion reduces its intensity. When you think, I'm feeling anxious, the prefrontal cortex, thinking brain, becomes more active, and the amygdala, emotional center, becomes less reactive. Practice getting specific with your naming. I'm feeling anxious and beneath that, vulnerable. I'm feeling angry and also disappointed. Fourth tool, mindful observation. Instead of being swept away by an emotion, practice observing it with curiosity, as if you're a scientist studying an interesting phenomenon. Interesting. Anxiety is here. Where do I feel it in my body? How intense is it on a scale of 1 to 10? What thoughts are accompanying it? What does it want me to do? This creates distance between you and the emotion. You're not the anxiety. You're the awareness observing the anxiety. Fifth tool, physical release. Emotions are energy that wants to move through your body. Sometimes the most effective way to work with them is physical. When you feel anxious energy, go for a walk or do jumping jacks. When you feel angry, engage in intense exercise or punch a pillow. When you feel sad, let yourself cry. Movement helps emotions complete their natural cycle instead of getting stuck. Recognizing signals before they escalate. The most powerful emotional skill isn't managing big emotions once they've taken over. It's recognizing the early signals before emotions escalate. Every emotional response has a progression. It doesn't go from zero to overwhelming instantly, though it can feel that way. There are always early warning signs, subtle shifts in your body, slight changes in your thoughts, small behavioral impulses. If you can catch these early signals, you can work with emotions while they're still manageable, before they become floods. What are your early warning signs? For anxiety, early signs might be slight tension in your shoulders, a quickening of your mental pace, a subtle urge to check your phone, shallow breathing you haven't noticed yet. For anger, early signs might be jaw tension, impatience with small things, critical thoughts. Speaking more sharply. For sadness, early signs might be a feeling of heaviness, withdrawing slightly from others, negative thinking patterns, loss of interest in activities. Learn your own signals. Pay attention to the earliest moments when an emotional state is beginning. That's your window of opportunity. A man named Thomas transformed his relationships by learning this skill. He used to have explosive anger that seemed to come from nowhere. But when he started paying attention, he realized there were always signs, 10, 15, 20 minutes before the explosion. First, he'd feel a slight tightness in his chest. Then he'd notice himself getting more critical in his thinking. Then he'd feel impatience building. Then his jaw would start clenching. Once he could see this progression, he could intervene early. At the first sign of chest tightness, he'd take a break, do some breathing, check in with himself about what was really bothering him. The explosions stopped happening. Not because he eliminated anger, but because he caught it early and worked with it skillfully. This is mastery, working with emotions while they're still small ripples instead of waiting until they're crashing waves. The truth about emotional mastery. Let's be clear about something: mastering your emotions doesn't mean controlling them perfectly. It doesn't mean never feeling anxious, angry, or sad. It doesn't mean achieving some permanently calm, unshakable state. Emotional mastery means understanding what you're feeling and why. Having skills to work with difficult emotions. Not being controlled by automatic emotional reactions. Able to feel deeply without being overwhelmed. Using emotions as information rather than treating them as problems. You will still feel fear. But you won't let it make all your decisions. You will still feel anger. But you won't let it damage your relationships. You will still feel sadness. But you won't let it become a permanent state. The goal isn't a life without difficult emotions. The goal is a life where you can be with all your emotions, skillfully, without losing yourself. Before you can master social skills, before you can navigate conversations confidently, set boundaries clearly, or connect authentically, you must master this inner world. Because everything you do externally flows from what's happening internally. When you understand your emotions, when you can work with them instead of being controlled by them, everything changes. Social situations stop feeling threatening because you know you can handle whatever feelings arise. Conversations become easier because you're not managing anxiety in the background. Connection becomes possible because you're not hiding behind emotional suppression. This is the foundation. Master it, and everything else becomes simpler. Chapter 3: Control Your Emotions, Steering Through the Storm. The Captain and the Storm. Imagine you're the captain of a ship. You're sailing across the ocean when dark clouds gather on the horizon. The wind picks up. Waves begin to swell. A storm is coming. Now, you have choices. You could panic and abandon the wheel, letting the storm toss your ship wherever it wants. You could deny the storm is happening and pretend everything's fine. You could try to eliminate the storm through sheer force of will, shouting at the clouds to disappear. None of these work. A skilled captain doesn't control the weather. They can't make the storm disappear or calm the waves through willpower. But they can control something far more important: how they respond to the storm. They adjust the sails. They change course. They secure loose cargo. They stay steady at the wheel. They navigate through the turbulence with skill, bringing the ship safely to the other side. This is what emotional control actually means. Not the impossible task of eliminating difficult emotions. Not the exhausting work of suppressing what you feel. But the powerful skill of steering yourself through emotional storms, of responding wisely instead of reacting blindly, of staying centered even when everything inside you is turbulent. Most people misunderstand emotional control. They think it means becoming some kind of emotionless robot, never feeling fear or anger or sadness. Or they think it means white-knuckling through difficult feelings, gritting their teeth and forcing themselves to stay positive. But real emotional control is something different. It's sophisticated. It's nuanced. And once you understand it, it becomes a genuine superpower, especially in social situations. Let me tell you about Marcus. Marcus was 34, working in sales, and on the surface, his life looked good. But inside, he felt constantly at the mercy of his emotions. A critical comment from a colleague would ruin his entire day. Anxiety before presentations would make him physically ill. When he felt rejected, even slightly, he'd spiral into dark moods that lasted for days. He wasn't choosing these reactions. They just happened to him, automatically, overwhelmingly. He felt like a passenger in his own life, carried along by emotional currents he couldn't direct. Then Marcus learned something that changed everything. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space lies your power. When someone criticized him, there was a moment, just a fraction of a second, between hearing the words and having an emotional reaction. He'd never noticed this moment before. His reactions felt instant, automatic, beyond his control. But when he started paying attention, really paying attention, he discovered the space was there. And with practice, he learned to widen that space, to pause in it, to choose his response instead of being hijacked by automatic reactions. This wasn't about suppressing emotions. It was about directing them. About being the captain of his own ship instead of a passenger tossed by the waves. Within a year, Marcus's entire life had transformed. Not because he stopped feeling difficult emotions, but because he learned to work with them skillfully. And that skill changed everything. The space between impulse and action. Let's dive deeper into this space, the gap between what happens and how you respond. Most people experience life as a direct chain. Something happens, you feel an emotion, you react. It feels seamless, instant, automatic. Someone says something that bothers you, and suddenly you're defending yourself or withdrawing or lashing out, all before you consciously decide to do anything. But there's actually a hidden step in this chain. Something happens, you interpret it, you feel an emotion, you have an impulse, you choose an action. The interpretation happens so fast you don't notice it. The impulse feels like an inevitable reaction. The action seems like the only possible response. But when you slow this process down, when you start to see each step distinctly, everything changes. Let me give you an example. You're at a social gathering. You say something you think is interesting, and the person you're talking to glances at their phone. In the automatic chain, this happens. They glance at phone. You feel hurt/rejected. You withdraw from the conversation or make a self-deprecating comment. But let's slow it down and see what's actually happening. The event, they glance at their phone. Your interpretation, they're bored. What I said wasn't interesting. They don't want to talk to me. Your emotion, hurt, embarrassment, rejection. Your impulse, withdraw, protect yourself, end the conversation. Your automatic action, anyway, I'm probably boring you. Now, here's what changes when you create space in this process. The event, they glance at their phone. Your awareness, I notice I'm interpreting this as rejection. But is that the only possibility? Maybe they're expecting an important call. Maybe they're checking the time. Maybe it has nothing to do with me. Your emotion, still some discomfort, but less intense, less personal. Your conscious choice, continue the conversation naturally, give them the benefit of the doubt, don't make it mean something about my worth. Your chosen action, keep engaging authentically, without defensive self-deprecation. See the difference? In the second scenario, you're not suppressing the emotion. You're not pretending it doesn't hurt a little. But you're also not letting an automatic interpretation trigger an automatic reaction that damages the interaction. You're creating space. And in that space, you have power. A woman named Jennifer discovered this principle in a particularly challenging moment. She was in a meeting, sharing an idea she'd been working on for weeks. Halfway through her presentation, she noticed her manager looking down at his laptop, apparently not paying attention. The old Jennifer would have immediately spiraled. The automatic interpretation would have been, "He thinks my idea is worthless. I'm wasting everyone's time. I should just stop talking." But Jennifer had been practicing creating space. So instead of immediately believing that interpretation, she noticed it, "I'm having the thought that he's not interested. That's an interpretation, not a fact." She felt the wave of anxiety and embarrassment rising, but she didn't let it dictate her actions. She continued her presentation, staying focused on the value of her idea rather than on his apparent inattention. After the meeting, her manager approached her. "Great presentation," he said. "I was taking notes on my laptop. I want to move forward with your proposal." If Jennifer had acted on her automatic interpretation, if she'd let that impulse control her behavior, she would have sabotaged her own success. But by creating space, by not immediately believing her anxious thoughts, she stayed in control. This is the essence of emotional control, creating space between what you feel and what you do. Reframing, the art of changing the story. One of the most powerful tools for emotional control is reframing, the ability to look at a situation from a different perspective and change the meaning you assign to it. Your emotions aren't triggered by events themselves. They're triggered by how you interpret events, by the meaning you make of them, by the story you tell yourself about what's happening. Change the story, and you change the emotion. This isn't about lying to yourself or forcing positive thinking. It's about recognizing that your initial interpretation isn't the only possible interpretation, and often isn't even the most accurate one. Let me show you how this works in practice. Situation: you're invited to a party where you won't know many people. Automatic frame: this is going to be awkward and uncomfortable. I'll stand around not knowing what to say. Everyone else will be having fun while I'm miserable. Emotional result: dread, anxiety, strong urge to decline the invitation. Reframe 1: this is an opportunity to practice social skills in a low-stakes environment. Nobody there knows me well, which means I can try new approaches without worrying about my reputation. Emotional result: curiosity, mild anxiety that feels more like excitement. Reframe 2: I might meet one interesting person. That's all I need. Not to be the life of the party, not to charm everyone, just one genuine connection. Emotional result: hope, openness, manageable nervousness. Reframe 3: this is just a few hours of my life. Even if it's uncomfortable, I'll survive it. And I might actually enjoy parts of it. Emotional result: calm acceptance, willingness to attend. Notice how each reframe changes the emotional experience. The situation didn't change. The party is still the same party. But by looking at it through different lenses, you create different emotional responses. This isn't manipulation or delusion. Each of these reframes is true, or at least as true as the original automatic frame. The anxious prediction that you'll be miserable isn't fact, it's just one possible story. A man named Daniel used reframing to transform his relationship with criticism. For years, any negative feedback would trigger intense shame and defensiveness. His automatic frame was, "This criticism means I'm incompetent. They've discovered I'm not as good as I pretended to be." This frame made criticism feel like an existential threat. His emotional response was massive: shame, anger, anxiety, and his behavior became defensive and closed off. Then Daniel learned to reframe. When he received criticism, he'd consciously offer himself different interpretations. "This is information that can help me improve. They care enough to give me honest feedback. This is about my behavior, not my worth as a person." Even skilled people receive criticism, it's part of growth. These reframes didn't eliminate discomfort entirely. Criticism still stung a little. But the emotional intensity decreased dramatically. And instead of shutting down or getting defensive, Daniel could actually learn from the feedback. The practice is simple. When you notice a strong emotional reaction, ask yourself, what story am I telling myself about this situation? What are other possible stories that might be equally true? You're not trying to convince yourself everything is wonderful. You're just opening up possibilities, creating flexibility in how you interpret experience. Staying calm under pressure, the physiology of control. Emotional control isn't just mental, it's deeply physical. Your body and emotions are constantly influencing each other in a feedback loop. When you feel anxious, your body responds, heart rate increases, breathing becomes shallow, muscles tense, stress hormones flood your system. But here's the crucial part, the feedback loop works both ways. When your heart rate increases and your breathing becomes shallow, your brain interprets these physical signals as evidence of danger, which creates more anxiety, which creates more physical activation, which creates more anxiety. It's a spiral. And most people get caught in it, especially in high-pressure social situations. But you can interrupt this spiral. You can use your body to change your emotional state. The breath is your most powerful tool. When you're anxious or angry, your breathing becomes fast and shallow, centered in your chest. This signals to your brain, we're in danger. We need to stay on high alert. But when you deliberately slow your breathing and breathe deeply into your belly, you send a different signal, we're safe. We can relax. Your nervous system has two modes, sympathetic, fight or flight, and parasympathetic, rest and digest. You can't directly tell your body, stop being anxious. But you can activate the parasympathetic system through breathing, which naturally calms the anxiety. Try this right now, breathe in slowly for a count of 4. Hold for a count of 4. Breathe out slowly for a count of 6. Repeat 5 times. Notice anything? Even in just these few breaths, something shifts. Your shoulders might relax slightly. Your mind might feel a bit clearer. The urgency you might have been feeling decreases a little. This is you taking control, using your physiology to regulate your emotions. Your posture also affects your emotional state. When you're anxious or defeated, your body naturally collapses inward, shoulders rounded, chest caved, head down. This posture reinforces the emotional state. But when you deliberately adopt an open, upright posture, shoulders back, chest open, head up, something shifts internally. You feel slightly more confident, more capable, more grounded. This isn't fake it till you make it positive thinking. It's basic psychophysiology. Your brain takes cues from your body about how you should feel. Amy Cuddy's research on power posing showed that holding an expansive posture for just 2 minutes can decrease cortisol, stress hormone, and increase testosterone, confidence hormone. The effects are real and measurable. Movement also regulates emotions. When you're flooded with anxiety or anger, that's energy that wants to move through your body. If you try to sit still with it, to hold it in, the intensity often builds. But if you move, go for a walk, do some jumping jacks, shake out your body, you give that energy somewhere to go. The emotional intensity naturally decreases. A woman named Sophia used to get overwhelmed before social events. She'd feel waves of anxiety that seemed impossible to manage. Then she learned this: before any event, she'd spend 10 minutes doing physical movement, dancing, stretching, even just walking briskly around her apartment. By the time she arrived at the event, the acute anxiety had dissipated. Not because she'd suppressed it, but because she'd given it physical expression. She'd moved the energy through instead of holding it in. This is embodied emotional control, using your body as an ally in managing your emotional state. Practicing awareness before reacting. Here's a truth that changes everything: you don't have to act on every emotion you feel. This seems obvious when stated plainly, but most people live as if emotions are commands that must be obeyed immediately. You feel angry, so you must express that anger right now. You feel anxious, so you must avoid the situation right now. You feel hurt, so you must withdraw right now. But emotions aren't commands. They're information. They're suggestions. They're worth listening to, but they don't have to dictate your behavior. Creating this distinction between feeling an emotion and acting on it is one of the most liberating skills you can develop. Let me introduce you to a practice that makes this possible: the pause. When you feel a strong emotion arising, especially one that's urging you to take immediate action, pause. Just for a moment. Don't act. Don't suppress. Just pause and become aware. In that pause, ask yourself 3 questions. 1. What am I actually feeling right now? Not the story about why you're feeling it, just the raw sensation. I'm feeling anger in my chest and jaw. I'm feeling anxiety in my stomach and shoulders. 2. What is this emotion urging me to do? It's urging me to defend myself. It's urging me to leave. It's urging me to hide. It's urging me to attack. 3. Is acting on this urge right now the wisest choice? Not, is this feeling valid? It always is, but is the action it's suggesting the best response for this situation? Sometimes the answer is yes, the emotion is giving you important information and the action it suggests is appropriate. If you feel anger because someone crossed a clear boundary, speaking up might be exactly right. If you feel fear because you're genuinely in danger, leaving might be the wise choice. But often, especially in social situations, the answer is no. The anxiety is suggesting you flee, but staying is actually safe and beneficial. The anger is urging you to lash out, but a calm response would be more effective. The hurt is telling you to withdraw, but staying engaged would build connection. The pause creates choice. And choice is power. A man named Robert used this practice to save his marriage. For years, whenever his wife criticized something he'd done, he'd immediately get defensive. He'd interrupt her, justify himself, counter with his own criticisms. It was automatic, instantaneous. Then Robert learned to pause. The next time his wife expressed frustration with him, he felt that familiar surge of defensive anger. But instead of immediately reacting, he paused. He noticed, I'm feeling anger and hurt. My jaw is tight. I want to defend myself and point out her flaws. Then he asked, is that the wisest response right now? And he realized, no. That response always made things worse. What his wife actually needed was to feel heard. What would help was listening, acknowledging her feelings, responding thoughtfully instead of defensively. So he took a breath and said, I can see you're frustrated. Tell me more about what's bothering you. His wife was shocked. It was the first time in years he hadn't immediately defended himself. And that moment of actually being heard, being met with openness instead of defensiveness, shifted their entire dynamic. The pause gave Robert access to wisdom his reactive, automatic self didn't have. It created space for a different choice. This is emotional control in action, feeling fully, but choosing wisely. Emotional control as a social superpower. Now let's talk about why all of this matters specifically for your social life. Why is emotional control such a powerful advantage in interactions with others? Because most people are controlled by their emotions. And people who aren't stand out dramatically. Think about the people you most respect and want to be around. Chances are, they have this quality: they stay calm under pressure. They don't get swept away by anxiety or anger. They respond thoughtfully instead of reacting impulsively. They seem to have an inner stability that others lack. This isn't because they don't feel emotions. It's because they've developed the skill of emotional control. When you have emotional control, you stay present in conversations. Instead of being pulled into anxious thoughts about how you're being perceived, you can actually listen and engage. Instead of getting defensive when someone disagrees, you can stay curious. Instead of retreating when things get uncomfortable, you can remain open. You handle conflict gracefully. When someone is upset or critical, you don't immediately react defensively or collapse into self-doubt. You can hear the feedback, consider it objectively, respond with clarity. You project confidence naturally. Confidence isn't about never feeling nervous. It's about feeling nervous and moving forward anyway, about managing your internal state so it doesn't leak out as awkwardness or desperation. You create safety for others. When you're emotionally regulated, when you're not volatile or reactive, people feel safe around you. They can be themselves because they're not worried about triggering some overwhelming reaction. You make better decisions. Instead of avoiding opportunities because of anxiety or saying yes to things out of guilt, you make choices based on what actually serves you. Let me share one final story about a woman named Claire. Claire worked in marketing, and for years she struggled with work social events. Every time her company had a gathering, she'd feel intense anxiety. She'd either skip the event entirely or spend it in the corner, barely speaking, desperate for it to be over. Then Claire learned these emotional control skills. Not all at once, gradually, over months of practice. She learned to breathe through anxiety. She learned to reframe her interpretation of social situations. She learned to create space between her emotions and her actions. The next company event, she still felt anxiety. But something was different. Instead of the anxiety controlling her, she directed it. She felt the nervousness in her body but didn't let it dictate her behavior. She noticed anxious thoughts but didn't believe them automatically. She created space between the urge to hide and the choice to engage. She approached people. She initiated conversations. When her anxiety spiked, she'd take a breath, reframe, "This discomfort is just nervous energy, not danger," and continue engaging. By the end of the night, something remarkable had happened. Not only had Claire survived the event, she'd actually enjoyed parts of it. She'd had genuine conversations. She'd laughed. She'd felt connected. And more importantly, she'd proven to herself, "I can feel uncomfortable and still show up. I can have anxiety and still be social. My emotions don't have to control my life." This is the superpower of emotional control. Not the elimination of difficult emotions, but the ability to navigate them skillfully, to stay at the helm of your ship no matter how rough the seas become. The practice, building emotional control daily. Emotional control isn't something you master once and have forever. It's a skill you build through consistent practice, like strengthening a muscle. Here's how to practice. Daily awareness check-ins. 3 times a day, pause and notice, what am I feeling right now? Where is it in my body? What's the intensity? No judgment, just observation. Breathing practice. Spend 5 minutes daily practicing slow, deliberate breathing. Build the skill when you're calm so it's available when you're not. Reframing exercises. When something triggers you, write down your automatic interpretation, then generate 3 alternative interpretations. Train your mind to see multiple perspectives. The pause in low-stakes situations. Practice creating space between impulse and action in everyday moments, before responding to a text, before reacting to a minor annoyance. Build the skill with small things so it's there for big things. Reflection after challenging moments. When you have a strong emotional reaction, especially one you're not proud of, reflect afterward. What triggered me? What was I feeling? What did I do? What could I do differently next time? This isn't about becoming perfect. It's about gradually building capacity, gradually expanding that space between stimulus and response, gradually developing the ability to steer through storms instead of being capsized by them. The ship is yours. The wheel is in your hands. The storms will come, they always do. But with these skills, with this practice, you can navigate through anything. And on the other side of the storm, you'll find something extraordinary: freedom. The freedom to feel fully without being controlled. The freedom to choose your responses instead of being hijacked by reactions. The freedom to show up in your life and your relationships exactly as you want to be. This is the power of emotional control. This is what becomes possible when you become the captain of your own ship. Chapter 4: Understand Others, Reading the Hidden Language. The Invisible Conversation. Every interaction you have contains 2 conversations. There's the surface conversation, the words being spoken, the topics being discussed. And beneath that, there's the invisible conversation, the emotions being felt, the needs being expressed, the meanings being communicated through tone, expression, and body language. Most people only hear the surface conversation. They listen to words and miss everything else. But the invisible conversation is where real connection happens. Let me tell you about Emma. Emma was brilliant with facts and ideas but struggled to connect with people. She'd have conversations where she said all the right things, but something felt off. People would drift away. Friendships remained surface level. Then someone pointed out something she'd never noticed: you respond to what people say, but not to what they feel. Emma was confused at first. Wasn't that the same thing? But then she started paying attention. A colleague said, "I'm fine," but her shoulders were tense and her smile didn't reach her eyes. A friend talked about a promotion with words of excitement but a tone of anxiety. Her brother said he didn't need help, but his entire posture communicated exhaustion. Emma had been taking words at face value, missing the emotional truth beneath them. Once she learned to see both conversations, everything changed. This is what understanding others actually means: reading the complete message, not just the verbal one. Empathy, feeling with, not feeling for. Empathy is misunderstood. People think it means feeling sorry for others or being a shoulder to cry on. But real empathy is something more powerful and more subtle. Empathy is the ability to sense what someone else is feeling and understand their experience from their perspective. Not agreeing with them. Not fixing their problems. Just truly getting what it's like to be them in this moment. A man named Jake discovered this distinction when his wife was stressed about work. His automatic response was always to solve the problem: "Here's what you should do." But she'd get frustrated: "You're not listening." He was listening to her words. But he wasn't feeling into her emotional experience. He was trying to fix instead of understand. When Jake learned real empathy, he changed his approach. Instead of immediately problem solving, he'd pause and try to sense what she was feeling. Overwhelmed? Anxious? Undervalued? Then he'd reflect that back: "It sounds like you're feeling really overwhelmed by all of this." The shift was immediate. His wife would relax, feeling truly heard. And often, once she felt understood, she'd solve the problem herself. Empathy creates connection because it says, "You're not alone. I see you. I get it." The practice is simple but requires presence. Listen to the emotion behind the words, not just the content. Notice what the person's body and tone are communicating. Ask yourself, what might they be feeling right now? Reflect back what you sense without trying to fix it. When someone says, "I had a terrible day," don't immediately offer solutions. Just acknowledge, "That sounds really hard." Let them feel seen before you try to help. Perspective taking, walking in different shoes. Empathy is feeling with someone. Perspective taking is understanding why they feel that way, seeing the situation through their eyes, from their history, with their concerns. Most conflicts happen because people can't do this. Everyone is locked in their own perspective, convinced their view is the only valid one. A woman named Lisa struggled with her teenage daughter. Every conversation became an argument. Lisa would think, "She's being so dramatic and irrational." Then her therapist asked, "What might this look like from her perspective?" Lisa paused. She'd never really considered it. She'd been so focused on being right that she hadn't tried to understand her daughter's experience. When Lisa genuinely tried perspective taking, she realized, her daughter felt controlled, not trusted. What Lisa saw as reasonable parenting, her daughter experienced as suffocation. Lisa's questions felt like interrogation. Her advice felt like criticism. Understanding this didn't mean Lisa changed all her boundaries. But it changed how she communicated them. And it transformed their relationship. Perspective taking isn't about agreeing. It's about understanding how someone could reasonably see things differently than you do. The practice. When someone's behavior confuses or frustrates you, ask, what would make their response make sense? Consider their background, pressures, fears, values. Think, if I had their experiences, might I react the same way? Recognize that behavior that seems irrational from the outside often has internal logic. This doesn't excuse bad behavior. But it creates understanding, which creates space for real communication. Nonverbal cues, the body's truth. Words can lie. Bodies rarely do. While someone is speaking, Their body is constantly broadcasting their true emotional state, through posture, facial microexpressions, gestures, tone, breathing patterns. Learning to read these cues is like developing a sixth sense. Suddenly you see what people aren't saying. Key nonverbal signals. Tension patterns. When someone is uncomfortable, their body tightens, shoulders rise, jaw clenches, breathing becomes shallow. When they're relaxed and genuine, their body is loose and open. Facial expressions. Real smiles reach the eyes, creating crow's feet. Fake smiles stay in the mouth. Micro-expressions, flashes of emotion lasting less than a second, reveal true feelings before conscious control kicks in.
Posture and proximity. When people feel connected, they naturally lean in. When uncomfortable, they lean back or angle away. Crossed arms often signal defensiveness or self-protecting. Tone and pace. The music of speech often matters more than the words. A tight, controlled voice suggests suppressed emotion. A fast, pressured pace suggests anxiety. Unusual pause might indicate someone choosing words carefully. Congruence. The most important skill is noticing when verbal and non-verbal messages don't match. Someone says, "I fine, will their voice is strengthened and their fists are clenched. Their not fine. A man named David became skilled at this and it transformed his sales career. He stopped focusing only on what clients said and started noticing what their bodies revealed. When a client said, "Sounds good," but their body tensed and they glanced away, David quietly had concerns. Instead of pushing forward, he created space, sensing some hesitation. What concerns do you have? This honesty created trust. Clients felt seen, not manipulated. And David's close-rated doubled. The practice, in your next conversation, spend half your attention on words and half on everything else, tone, posture, expression, energy. What is the complete message? Emotional resonance, tuning into the field. There is a deeper level of understanding others that's harder to articulate but incredibly powerful. It is the ability to sense the emotional atmosphere around someone, to tune into what they're feeling even when they're not expressing it. Some people call this intuition. Others call it emotional sensitivity. Whatever you call it, you probably already have it, you were just learned to ignore it. You walk into a room and immediately sense tension, even though everyone is smiling. You met someone who says all the right things but something feels off. You know your friend is upset before they tell you. This isn't magic. It is your nervous system picking up subtle cues, changing energy, microexpressions, tone variations, the thousand tiny signals people broadcast constantly. The skill is learning to trust these perceptions instead of dismissing them. When you sense something, this person seems nervous, or there is something they're not saying, don't immediately rationalize it away. Hold it lightly as a possibility. Test it gently, how are you really doing? Often people are waiting for permission to be honest. Your willingness to see beneath the surface gives them that permission. Observing without overthinking. Here is the paradox: to understand others deeply, you must observe carefully. But you must also avoid getting lost in analysis, overthinking every gesture, reading meaning into everything. The balance is mindful observation, noticing without grasping, perceiving without wooding. Don't obsess over every microexpression, convince yourself you know exactly what someone is thinking, make definitive conclusions from limited data. Though stay present and receptive, notice patterns over time, hold your interpretations lightly, check your perceptions with gently questions. A woman named Sophie was naturally empathetic but got overwhelmed by overthinking. She'd analyze every interaction endlessly, What did they mean by that? Did they look away? Did it offend them? Learned to practice what called soft focus, being attentive without being obsessive. Notice, but don't ficate. Hercey but don't panic. Trust your instincts, but hold them lightly. The practice is presence. When you read someone, be fully there. Not planning your response, not lost in your own thoughts, not rehearsing or analyzing, just present. In that presence, understanding arises naturally. Understanding the emotions behind behavior. Here is a trait that transforms how you see people. All behavior makes sense when you understand the emotions and needs behind it. That difficult colleague who constantly criticizes. They might be operating from fear and insecurity. That friend who cancels plans frequently. They might be struck with anxiety or depression. That person who seems cold and distant. They might be protecting themselves from vulnerability. When you can see the emotion-driven behavior, judgment melts into compassion. Not adjusting the behavior, just understanding it. The practice, when someone's behavior bothers you, ask, what pain or fear might be driving this? What need are they trying to meet? This doesn't mean tolerating everything. But it creates the foundation for genuine connection, seeing people as complex, through humans rather than as problems or obstacles. Understanding others isn't about becoming a mindreder. It is about becoming present enough, curious enough, and compassionate enough to perceive the full human being in front of you with all their fears, hopes, needs, and protective strategies. And when you can do that, when you can say and respond to the invisible conversation, connection becomes effortless. Because people feel something they rarely feel, truly understood. This is the real relationships begin. Chapter 5, Build Rapport, Constructing the Invisible Bridge. Close your eyes for a moment and think, recall someone in your life who truly connected with you, who understood you, who made you feel like they spoke your language. Maybe it was a teacher, perhaps a friend, or maybe even a stranger who made you feel comfortable within the first few minutes of meeting them. What did you feel in that person's presence? Likely, you felt safe. You could be yourself. You weren't afraid of being wounded. This is the power of rapport. Rapport is a word of French origin, and in its simplest definition. It means harmonious relationship. But I prefer to define it differently. Rapport is the invisible bridge between people. When this bridge is strong, ideas flow, emotions are shared, trust is born. When this bridge is weak or non-existent, no matter how intelligent you are, no matter how right your words may be, you cannot reach the person in front of you. In this chapter, you will learn how to build this bridge. And this is not manipulation. You might ask, but is this genuine? Here is where the beautiful part begins. Real rapport cannot be faked. You can learn techniques, but if your spirit isn't in it, the person in front of you will sense it. This chapter will be about both an internal transformation and eternal skills. Authenticity, the foundation of everything. The first and most important principle of building rapport is authenticity. Authenticity means being yourself, unmasked, unadorned, existing without pretense. But be careful, authenticity does not mean totally saying everything. Rather, it means being aware of who you are and expressing it appropriately. Let me tell you about Ayşe, whom I met at a conference last year. Ayşe was a sales manager at a corporate company. She would always prepare for client meetings the same way, dress professional, prepare presentation files, to deliver a perfect performance. but there was a problem, clients didn't trust her. Sales were low, and morale was even lower. One day, on her way to an important client meeting, her car broke down. She couldn't find a taxi and had to run to get there. She entered the meeting suite, with disheveled hair, out of breath. She apologized and explained the situation. And in that moment, something unexpected happened, the client laughed. We all have a days like that, he said. That meeting became one of the most successful meetings of Ayşe's career. Because that day, for the first time, she was there without wearing a mask, vulnerable and real. Authenticity is not perfection. Authenticity is reality. People may admire perfection, but they connect with reality. When you hide yourself, the person in front of you hides too. When you open yourself, they open as well. This is known in psychology as the reciprocity principle. So what does being authentic mean in practice? First, it means knowing your own values. What do you believe in? What do you care about? No meeting or conversation, it means saying what you truly think, not just what the other person wants to hear. But of course, this needs to be done with kindness and empathy. Being authentic also means admitting your mistakes. Being able to say, I don't know, I was wrong, I may inexperienced in this area. This process don't show weakness, they show strength. Because only someone who is confident can admit what they don't know. It means harmonious relationship. But I prefer to define it differently. Rapport is the invisible bridge between people. When this bridge is strong, ideas flow, emotions are shared, trust is born. When this bridge is weak or non-existent, no matter how intelligent you are, no matter how right your words may be, you cannot reach the person in front of you. In this chapter, you will learn how to build this bridge. And this is not manipulation. You might ask, but is this genuine? Here's where the beautiful part begins. Real rapport cannot be faked. You can learn techniques, but if your spirit isn't in it, the person in front of you will sense it. This chapter will be about both an internal transformation and external skills. Authenticity, the foundation of everything. The first and most important principle of building rapport is authenticity. Authenticity means being yourself, unmasked, unadorned, existing without pretense. But be careful, authenticity does not mean totally saying everything. Rather, it means being aware of who you are and expressing it appropriately. Let me tell you about Ayşe, whom I met at a conference last year. Ayşe was a sales manager at a corporate company. She would always prepare for client meetings the same way, dress professional, prepare presentation files, try to deliver a perfect performance. But there was a problem, clients didn't trust her. Sales were low, and morale was even lower. One day, on her way to an important client meeting, her car broke down. She couldn't find a taxi and had to run to get there. She entered the meeting suite, with disheveled hair, out of breath. She apologized and explained the situation. And in that moment, something unexpected happened, the client laughed. We all have a days like that, he said. That meeting became one of the most successful meetings of Ayşe's career. Because that day, for the first time, she was there without wearing a mask, vulnerable and real. Authenticity is not perfection. Authenticity is reality. People may admire perfection, but they connect with reality. When you hide yourself, the person in front of you hides too. When you open yourself, they open as well. This is known in psychology as the reciprocity principle. So what does being authentic mean in practice? First, it means knowing your own values. What do you believe in? What do you care about? Now meeting or conversation, it means saying what you truly think, not just what the other person wants to hear. But of course, this needs to be done with kindness and empathy. Being authentic also means admitting your mistakes. Being able to say, I don't know, I was wrong, I may inexperienced in this area. This process don't show weakness, they show strength. Because only someone who is confident can admit what they don't know. Everyone wants to talk, nobody listens. And because of this, someone who truly listens immediately stands out and forms a deep connection. Active listening is much more than hearing. Active listening means being there with your entire being. It means hearing not just what the person in front of you is saying, but also what they're not saying. Let me tell a story. My sister Elif was a guidance counselor at a high school. One day, a troubled student came to her. The kid was complaining that his family didn't understand him. Elif first gave the classic response, they love you, they act that way because they're worried, comforting words like that. But the kid closed up even more. Then Elif tried something different. She just listened. She didn't interrupt, didn't give advice, didn't produce solutions. She just made eye contact, noted, occasional said, I understand. As the kid spoke, he opened up more and more. Finally, he told the real problem, he was afraid of not meeting his own expectations, not his family's. Elif didn't suggest any solutions. But when the kid left her office, he said, thank you, I feel so much better. This is the power of active listening. People often don't want solutions, they just want to be heard. Active listening has some fundamental elements. First, eye contact. Look into the eyes of the person in front of you. Not at your phone, not at people around, but at them. This simple action sends the message, you are important to me. Second, body language. Lean toward them. Don't cross your arms. Display an open posture. Show with your body that you're listening to. Third, verbal acknowledge. Small expressions like yes, I understand, go on encourage the speaker. But be careful, this shouldn't be mechanical. If you're truly listening, they'll come out naturally anyway. Fourth, reflection. Repeat what the person in front of you said in your own words. For example, so the most important thing for you is being able to spend time with your family, is that right? This both shows you understood and prevents misunderstandings. Fifth, asking questions. But real, curious questions. How did you feel that way? What were you thinking at that moment? What does this mean to you? These questions make the other person think deeply. And most importantly, allow silence. There will be moments of silence during conversation. Don't panic and immediately fill the void. Sometimes, the deepest thoughts emerge in silence. An exercise, today, while talking with someone, just listen. Resist the urge to interrupt. Resist the urge to give advice. Just be there. And see what happens. Emotional tone matching, the language of the heart. People connect through emotions, not logic. You can say something correctly, but if you say it with the wrong emotional tone, the person in front of you will close off. You might not say something entirely correctly, but if you say it with the right emotional tone, the person in front of you will open up. Emotional tone matching means recognizing the emotional state of the person in front of you and responding appropriately. This is not imitating their emotions, but acknowledging and validating them. For example, your friend comes to you and is very sad. They have benefited from their hope. What do you say? If you say, "Don't worry, you'll find something better," this is actually an opportunity, you might be logically correct. But emotional, it's wrong. Because your friend is currently sad, scared, perhaps angry. Your cheerful and optimistic tone invalidates their feelings. Instead, first validate their emotions. Say, "This must be so hard. To understand, you must be feeling disappointed." First meet them in the same emotional space. When they are ready, you jump move on to solutions. This is called pace and lead. First meet the person there. Then, slowly, guide them to a different place. A therapist friend explained this perfectly: if someone is in a pit, shooting from above, get out of there doesn't work. First you have to go down into the pit, stand beside them. Then you climb out together. For emotional tone matching, first learn to read the emotional state of the person in front of you correctly. Pay attention to facial expressions, voice tone, body language. Are they happy? Sad? Tense? Agitated? Scared? Then adjust your own emotional tone accordingly. If the person in front of you is calm and thoughtful, you be calm too. If they're agitated and energetic, you be a bit more lively. But again, don't overdo it. The goal is not to be the same, but to be harmonious. And an important point, validating negative emotions is not reinforcing them. Acknowledging someone's sadness doesn't make them sadder. On the contrary, it usually brings relief. Because when a person feels understood, they can more easily let go of their emotions. One day, my little nephew came to me very sad. His toy had broken. I first said, "But you have other toys." He cried even more. Then I tried something different. "You're very sad, aren't you? It was your favorite toy." He just nodded, hugged me, and a few minutes later went off to play. After I validated his emotion, he was able to let it go. Being seen and safety, the foundation of connection. Every human being's deepest desire is to be seen and accepted. To be seen with their uniqueness, their flaws, their beauty. And most people go hungry for this feeling throughout their lives. The essence of building rapport is giving the person in front of you the message, "I see you. Here you. You matter here." You can do this with words, but mostly you do it without words, with your presence. I heard a story about Zeynep, who worked at a coffee shop. Hundreds of customers came and went every day. Most ordered while talking on the phone, didn't make eye contact, didn't even say thank you. Over time, Zeynep had become dispirited, doing her job just mechanically. But one day, an elderly man came in. He looked at Zeynep and asked, "Good morning, how are you?" Not just out of politeness, but as if he genuinely cared. Zeynep was surprised and said, "Fine, thank you." The man smiled and said, "Gentle, it shows on the face of good people." Such a simple interaction, but Zeynep never forgot that day. Because that man saw her. Not just as someone serving coffee, but as a human being. Being seen starts with paying attention. Focus completely on the person in front of you. Not just on what they're saying, but on who they are. Notice small details. Maybe there's a new haircut, maybe they look a bit tired, maybe their eyes are sparkling. Ed mention it kindly. You look tired, did you have a tough day, or you look happy, did something good happen? These small signs of attention don't say, you're invisible to me, but rather, I notice you. And this creates a powerful bond. Safety is the second pillar of rapport. People cannot open up or connect in an environment where they don't feel safe. Safety can be physical, but it can also be emotional. Emotional safety is the feeling of not being would get. When the person in front of you says something, you don't immediately criticize, mock or belittle. You accept what they feel, think and apprehend. This doesn't mean agreeing, it means respecting. A friend of mine thought he asked a stupid question in a meeting and felt embarrassed. But his manager said, actually, this is a very good question, others must be wondering too. In that moment, my friend both felt relieved and trusted that manager. Because the manager had created a safe space. To create safety, confidentiality is important. If the person in front of you tells you something, don't tell others. Trust is built slowly but can be destroyed in an instant. Also, being predictable is important. If you show up with a different personality every day, people can't trust you. Be consistent. Keep your word. Fulfill even your small promises. Instant connection, first impression and beyond. First impressions matter, but rapport is not a one-time event. Rapport is something that is continuously nurtured and maintained. It's like a garden, if you just plant seeds and leave them, they wither. You need to constantly water, fertilize, and care for them. The first meeting, people generally form an opinion within the first 7-10 seconds. This may not be fair, but it's real. This is why the first moments matter. Simile. Make eye contact. Be warm. Display a posture that's energetic but not aggressive. But more importantly, it's the minutes, hours, and days that follow. Rapport strengthens with consistency. In each interaction, it either deepens a bit more or weakens a bit. Our colleague of mine started very well with a new team. On the first day, he was very friendly, helpful, cheerful. But in the following days, as he came under stress, he became irritable, critical, distant. People were confused, is this the real him or the one we saw on the first day? In the end, no one trusted him. Because he was inconsistent. Building rapport is not about wearing a mask. It's not about constantly trying to show your best self either. It's about expressing yourself, but in a respectful and conscious way. Practical applications, rapport in daily life. How do you integrate all of this into your life? Here are some practical steps. Morning routine, every morning, look in the mirror and ask yourself, how do I want to connect with people today? This intention shapes your day. Daily interactions, from the grocery store cashier to a stranger on public transport to your work colleague, pay a bit more attention to everyone. Make eye contact. Simile. Give a small compliment or ask a question. Deep conversations, at least once a week, have a truly deep conversation with someone. Go beyond surface topics. Instead of how are you, ask what's been making you happiest lately. Listening practice, every day when talking with someone, just listen. Resist the urge to tell your own stories. Just be there. Attention to mirroring, for 1 week, notice how people mirror you. When you speak quickly, do they speed up too? When you simile, do they simile too? Consciously mirror others and observe the difference. Feedback, ask someone you trust how they feel when talking with you. Make you feel comfortable. Do you feel heard? This provides very valuable insight. Obstacles and traps. There are some common mistakes when building rapport. First, trying too hard. Attempting to do too much makes you appear artificial. Be relaxed. Be natural. Second, trying to build rapport the same way with everyone. Everyone is different. Some people warm up quickly, others take time. Some people love talking a lot, others prefer silence. Be flexible. Third, using rapport for manipulation. If you're only building rapport to get something from someone, this will eventually come out. People sense insincerity. Rapport should be for mutual connection, not mutual exploitation. Fourth, losing yourself. When building rapport, you might conform too much to the other person and lose your own identity. This might work short term, but long term both you and the other person will feel uncomfortable. Be yourself. The power of transformation. At one period in my life, I struggled greatly to connect with people. I was introverted, socially underdeveloped. When I entered a room, nobody noticed me. And I felt invisible. Then I started learning these principles. I applied them in small ways. At first, it felt artificial. But over time, it became natural. And one day I realized that people enjoyed talking with me. I was making friends. My teammates at work trusted me. And most importantly, I no longer felt alone. Rapport is not just about the outside, about others. It is also about the inside, about yourself. When you build rapport with yourself, you can more easily build it with others. When you accept yourself, others accept you too. Conclusion, continuing to build the bridge. Rapport is not a destination, it is a journey. Every day, in every interaction, you have the opportunity to build this bridge. Sometimes the bridge is strong and solid. Sometimes it sighs, or even collapses. But what matters is continuing to rebuild it. The principles you will learn in this chapter, authenticity, natural mirroring, active listening, emotional tone matching, are not just techniques, they are ways of living. As you put them into practice, you connect more deeply not just with others, but with the faith itself. Pause for a moment. Take a deep breath. And think, today, who will you build a bridge with? What connection will you create? Remember, every conversation is an opportunity. Every glance, every word, every moment of presence is a brick in the invisible bridge between hearts. Go forth and build your bridge. The world needs more connection, more understanding, more genuine human contact. And it starts with you, right here, right now. Chapter 7, Lead Conversations, The Art of Building Energy. There is a common misconception about great conversationalists. People imagine them as the loudest voice in the room, those who dominate every discussion, the storytellers who never pause for breath. But if you observe carefully, you'll notice something different. The best conversationalists are often the quietest. They don't talk the most, they guide the most. Think of a conductor in an orchestra. The conductor doesn't play an instrument. They don't create the sound. But without them, there is chaos. The conductor's role is to guide, to shape, to bring out the best in every musician. That's what a great conversationalist does. Do guide the energy, shape the flow, and bring out the best in everyone involved. In this chapter, you'll learn how to be a method conductor. You'll discover how to ask questions that open doors, how to steer conversations without forcing them, how to balance depth with lightness, and how to make every person you talk to feel like they matter. By the end, you'll understand why so many people leave conversations energized while others leave them drained. The power of open questions. Most conversations the because of closed questions. Did you have a good day? Yes. Silence. Do you like your hobby? Not really. Silence. These questions are dead and say. They require minimal response and create minimal connection. Open questions, on the other hand, are invitations. They ask for stories, not facts. They request feelings, not confirmations. Instead of "Did you have a good day?" try "What was the best part of your day?" Say the difference. One can be answered with a single word. The other requires thought, reflection, storytelling. I learned this lesson from my uncle Mehmet. He was a taxi driver for 10 years, and people loved talking to him. Once asked him his secret. He said, "I never ask yes or no questions. Ask people to tell me something." He would say things like, "Tell me about your neighborhood," or "What's your story with this city?" People would talk for the entire day. Open questions typically start with "What," "How," or "Tell me about." They create space for the other person to explore their thoughts. What brought you to this event? How did you get interested in that? Tell me about your experience with. These questions signal genuine curiosity. But here is the critical part: you must actually be curious. If you ask an open question but your eyes are wandering, checking your phone, or looking for an exit, the other person will sense it immediately. False curiosity is worse than no curiosity. It feels like betrayal. Let me share a story. At a networking event, I met two people within 10 minutes. The first asked, "So what do you do?" I told him. He immediately started talking about himself. The second person asked, "What's been exciting you most about your work lately?" I paused. No one had asked me that before. I told him about a project I was passionate about. We talked for 10 minutes. Guess which person I remember? Here is a practice: for 1 week, eliminate yes or no questions from your conversations. Every time you're about to ask one, replace it into an open question. Watch how conversations transform. Steering without forcing. Leading a conversation is not the same as controlling it. Control is rigid. Leadership is fluid. When you try to control a conversation, people feel trapped. When you lead it, they feel guided. Think of a river. A good conversationalist is like a riverbank. They give the water direction, but they don't stop it from flowing. The conversation can move naturally, but you can't guide it toward interesting or meaningful place. So how do you steer without forcing? Frog transitions. Smooth transitions are the secret of conversational leadership. You listen for keywords, emotions, or themes, and use them as bridge to new topics. For example, someone mentions the event hiking last weekend. You could just say "cool" and let it drop. Or you could pick up that thread, hiking. I've always been curious about that. What drives you to it? No, they're talking about nature, solitude, challenge, whatever hiking means to them. And from there, you might steer toward what they value in life, how they handle stress, what gives them peace. Notice what happened. You didn't interrogate. You didn't force. You simply followed the energy and gently directed it to somewhere deeper. My friend Elif is a master at this. At a dinner party, Simeone mentioned they were stressed about work. Instead of offering advice or changing the subject, Elif said, stress at work, that's so common but everyone experiences it differently. What does it look like for you? The person opened up. Others joined in. What could have been a complete session became a meaningful discussion about balance, priorities, and self-care. Elif didn't plan it. She just stirred the energy. Here's another technique, the callback. This is when you remember something the person mentioned earlier and bring it back. You mentioned you were nervous about that presentation, how did it go? This shows you were truly listening and creates continuity in the relationship. But be careful of one trap, tangent chasing. This is when someone mentions something random, and you immediately jump on it, taking the conversation in a completely different direction. Sometimes this works, but often it feels disjointed. Before steering, ask yourself, will this direction add value, or am I just filling space? Balancing depth and thickness. Not every conversation needs to be profound. Not every conversation should be shallow. The art is knowing when to go deep and when to stay light. Lightness is underrated. Small talk gets a bad reputation, but it serves a purpose. ITS the warm-up. ITS have a test safety before a vulnerability. When you meet someone new, jumping straight into, what's your greatest fear, is worrying. You start with weather, work, weekend plans. This isn't wasted time, ITS building trust. But many people get stuck in the shallow end. They never move beyond surface level pleasantries. The conversation never gets any meaningful. Both people walk away thinking, that was nice, but feeling empty. Great conversationalists know how to transition from light to deep naturally. They use what I call depth quiz, moments when someone reveals something slightly more personal or meaningful. Maybe they mention a challenge, a passion, a change in their life. That's your see. That's when you gently go deeper. For instance, someone says, I've been tried lately. That's a depth see. You could stylite, yeah, it's that time of year. Or you could go slightly deeper, tried in what way, like physical worn-out, or more like emotional drain. Say what you did. You gave them permission to share more if they want to. Here's the key, offer the depth, but don't force it. If they say, oh, just physical thread, and move on, respect that. They're not ready. But often, people are relieved when someone notices and carries enough to ask. I remember talking to a colleague at lunch. She mentioned her mom was visiting. I could have said, that's nice, and moved on. Instead, I asked, how do you feel about that? Her face changed. She said, honestly. Anxious. We ended up talking about family dynamics, expectations, and setting boundaries. It was a 20-minute conversation that strengthened our friendship significantly. All because I noticed the depth. On the flip side, know when to lighten up. If a conversation gets too heavy, too intense, people need a break. You can use humor, change the subject, or acknowledge the with, wow, we went deep there. Shall we talk about something lighter for a bit? This shows emotional intelligence. Balance is everything. Think of conversation like music, you need both the crescendos and the quiet moments. All intensity exhausts people. All lightness bores them. Varid rhythm. Makın goters fel valuet. Heres a trat that will change how you approach conversations. People don't remember what you said, they remember how you made them feel. You could have the most brilliant insights, the funniest voices, the most interesting stories, but if the other person doesn't feel valued, the conversation fails. So how do you make someone feel valued? Starts with presence. Put your phone away. Turn your body toward them. Make eye contact. This seems obvious, but look around any coffee shop or restaurant. How many people are physical together but mentally absent? Presence is the first gift. The second is validation. Validation doesn't mean agreement. It means acknowledging someone's appearance as real and legitimate. When someone shares a feeling or opinion, even if you disagree, you can validate the emotion behind it. For example, someone says, I'm so frustrated with my boss. You might think their boss is actually reasonable, but you don't say, you're overreacting. Instead, that sounds really frustrating. What happened? You validated their feeling without endorsing their interpretation. This creates safety. Another way to make people feel valued is to ask follow-up questions. This signals that you're not just waiting for your turn to talk, you're genuinely interested in their answer. We mentioned the love photography. Don't just nod and move on. Ask, what do you love about it, or what kind of photography, or how did you get into that? Each follow-up question says, you matter. Your interests matter. I want to understand you better. Let me tell you about Kemal. Kemal was a janitor at my office building. Most people barely acknowledged him. One day, I asked how his day was going. He gave the usual fine. I asked, what's the hardest part of your job? He looked surprised. Then he told me about dealing with people's messes, about being invisible, about hoping his kids would have different opportunities. We talked for 15 minutes. From then on, whenever we crossed paths, he smiled genuinely. I didn't solve his problems. I just saw him. That's the power of making someone feel valued. It is not about grand gestures. It is about small, consistent acts of recognition. Here is a practice, in every conversation today, ask at least a way of follow-up questions. Not for the sake of technique, but because you're genuinely curious. Notice how the conversation deepens. Becoming the person everyone enjoys talking to. You know those people who light up a room. Not because they're the loudest or the funniest, but because somehow, everyone feels better after talking to them. That's not an accident. It is a skill. And you can develop it. The first principle, make it about them, not you. Most people enter conversations thinking, what can I say? How can I be interesting? Wrong focus. Instead, think, how can I make this person feel heard, understood, valued? When you shift from performing to connecting, everything changes. This doesn't mean you never talk about yourself. It means you share in service of connection, not ego. You share stories that relate to what they're saying, that add value, that create resonance. You don't yak the conversation to showcase yourself. Second principle, bring positive energy. Notice I said positive, not fake happy. Positive energy means being present, engaged, curious, warm. It means not complaining constantly or draining others with negativity. People gravitate toward those who make them feel uplifted, not depleted. Think about your own life. Who do you love talking to? Probably someone who listens well, who asks good questions, who makes you feel interesting and valued. You can be that person for others. Hayır principle, be comfortable with silence. Weak conversationalists panic at silence and fill it with noise. Strong honest understand that silence is part of the RHTM. Sometimes, after someone shares something meaningful, the best response is a pause. Let it land. Let it breathe. A therapist friend conduct a session once. The client said something vulnerable. My friend didn't immediately respond. He just sat there, nodding gently, holding space. 5 seconds passed. Then the client continued, going even deeper. Later, I asked my friend about it. He said, silence is the red thread lives. We rushed to fill it, I robbed them of their own insight. Fourth principle, adapt to the person. Different people need different conversational styles. Some people love deep philosophical discussions. Others prefer light banter. Some need lots of energy. Others need calm. Pay attention and adjust. This isn't being fake, it's being respectful and flexible. Practical exercises for conversational leadership. Let's make this concrete. Here are specific exercises to develop your skills. Exercise 1, The Question Journal. For 1 week, write down the best question you asked each day and how the person responded. This trains your brain to notice what works. Exercise 2, The Listening Challenge. Have a 10-minute conversation where your only hobby is to ask questions and listen. Don't share a single story about yourself. Say how deep you can take the conversation. Exercise 3, The Energy Mapping. After 3 different conversations, write down, what was the energy like? Did it increase or decrease? When did it shift? What caused those shifts? This builds awareness of conversational dynamics. Exercise 4, The Awkward Silence Sit. Next time there is a silence in conversation, don't fill it immediately. Count to 5 in your head. Get comfortable with the pause. Exercise 5, The Follow-up Habit. For every statement someone makes, ask at least one follow-up question before sharing your own thoughts. Make this automatic. The long game. Leading conversations isn't about winning or impressing. It's about creating an appearance that everyone leaves feeling better than when they arrived. It's about building relationships that matter, one conversation at a time. Remember, you're not trying to be the most interesting person in the room. You're trying to be the most interested person in the room. There is a profound difference. Start small. Practice with one person today. Ask one better question. Listen one moment longer. Notice one thing that matters to them. Then build from there. Conversations are the fabric of human connection. When you learn to lead them with skill and heart, you don't just improve your social life, you enrich your entire exchange. Because at the end of the day, life is just a series of conversations. Make yours count. Chapter 6, Maintain Boundaries, Protecting Your Emotional World. Imagine a beautiful garden. It has vibrant flowers, heady soil, clear paths. Non imagine that garden without a fence. Animals wander through, trampling the flowers. Strangers should talk, taking whatever they want. Without boundaries, even the most beautiful garden becomes chaotic, damaged, depleted. Your emotional world is that garden. And boundaries are a defense that protects it. Many people misunderstand boundaries. They think boundaries are vast, cold, distant, unfriendly. They ignore that setting boundaries makes them selfish or difficult. But the opposite is true. Boundaries don't push people away. They create the safety and clarity that allow real intimacy to flourish. In this chapter, you learn how to identify your limits, communicate them with confidence, avoid the exhausting trap of people pleasing, and stay connected to others without losing yourself in the process. Because here's the truth, healthy boundaries don't weaken relationships. They strengthen them. Identifying your limits, knowing where you end. Before you can set boundaries, you need to know what they are. This sounds simple, but many people have lived so long without boundaries that they've lost touch with their own limits. They don't know where they end and others begin. Your limits are personal. What feels invasive to you might feel fine to someone else. What drains you might energize another person. There is no universal rulebook. The question is, what do you need to feel safe, respected, and well? Start by paying attention to your body. Your body always knows before your mind does. Notice when you feel tension, tightness in your chest, a sinking feeling in your stomach, or sudden exhaustion. These are signals. Your body is saying, this doesn't feel right. This is too much. I learned this the hard way. For years, I said yes to every request. A colleague needed help on a weekend. Sure. A friend wanted to vent for horse. Of course. Someone asked to borrow money. WHA not. I thought I was being kind and generous. But I was constantly exhausted, resentful, and empty. One day, my sister asked me to help her move. Again. For the third time that year. I said yes automatically. But as I hung up the phone, I felt this wave of anger and tiredness. My therapist asked me a simple question: what would happen if you said no? I could answer. I realized I had no idea what my limits even were. I had spent so long accommodating everyone else that I had disappeared. So I started an exercise. Every time I felt uncomfortable, drained, or resentful, I wrote it down. I don't like when people call me after 1 p.m. I feel invaded when someone asks about my finances. I hate when people assume I'm available without asking first. Slowly, a picture emerged. These were my boundaries. Here are some questions to help you identify yours. When do you feel most drained after social interactions? What topics make you uncomfortable? What requests make you feel resentful even as you agree? When do you feel like you're betraying yourself? What behaviors from others make you feel disrespected? Your answers reveal your boundaries. Write them down. Not to show anyone else, just to know them yourself. Because you can't protect what you can't name. Communicating needs clearly, the power of directness. Once you know your boundaries, you need to communicate them. This is where most people falter. They hint, hope, expect others to read their minds, then fail hurt when boundaries are crossed. Clear communication isn't mean. It is a kind. It prevents misunderstandings and resentment. When you're unclear, you set others up to fail. When you redirect, you give people the information they need to respect you. Let's talk about how to communicate boundaries effectively. First, be specific. I need space, is vague. I need an hour alone when I get home from work before we talk, is clear. Don't be rude, is subjective. Please don't interrupt me when I'm speaking, is actionable. Second, use I statements, not you accusations. You always invade my privacy, put someone on the defensive. I feel uncomfortable when my phone is looked at without permission, expresses your need without attacking. Third, be calm and firm. Not aggressive, not apologetic, firm. Your tone matters as much as your words. If you sound uncertain or guilty, people will sense the jump pushback. If you sound angry, they'll get defensive. Steady, calm confidence is the key. Here's a real example. My friend Dennis had a mother who would show up unannounced at her apartment. Every time, Dennis felt invaded but said nothing because she is my mother. The resentment built until Dennis started avoiding her calls entirely. Finally, Dennis decided to set a boundary. She called her mother and said, "Mom, I love you and I love seeing you. But I need you to call before you come over. My home is my private space, and I need to know when to expect visitors." Can you do that? Her mother was hurt at first. But Dennis stayed calm and clear. Eventually, her mother agreed. The relationship actually improved because the resentment disappeared. Notice what Dennis did. She stated her need clearly. She explained why it mattered. She was respectful but firm. She didn't apologize for having the boundary. That last part is crucial. Don't apologize for your boundaries. I'm sorry, but I can't work this weekend, suggests you're doing something wrong by having limits. Instead, I'm not available this weekend. Period. You can be warm and friendly while still being clear. Sometimes people will push back. They'll say you're being difficult, selfish, or oversensitive. This is a test. Hold firm. People who respect you will adjust. People who don't respect you will reveal themselves, and that's valuable information. Avoiding pleasure, the trap of endless yes. Pleasure is an exhausting way to live. You twist yourself into shapes to make others happy. You say yes when you mean no. You prioritize everyone's needs above your own. And in the end, you're depleted, resentful, and ironically, not even genuinely liked, because nobody knows the real you. Let's be clear about what pleasure is. It is not kindness. It is not generosity. It is fear. Fear of rejection, conflict, or disapproval. It is the belief that your worth depends on others' approval. And it is a person. It said to be a chronic pleasure. Someone would ask for a favor, and even if I was overwhelmed, exhausted, or uninterested, I'd say yes. I thought this made me a good person. But here's what actually happened: I attracted people who took advantage of me. The people who actually valued me felt confused because they never knew what I truly wanted or needed. The turning point came when a friend said to me, "I never know if you actually want to hang out or if you're just being nice." That stung. My pleasure wasn't creating connection, it was creating confusion and distance. Breaking the pleasure habit requires understanding why you do it. For me, it was childhood. I learned that being good meant being accommodating. Saying no felt dangerous. Maybe your story is different. Maybe you learned that love is conditional. Maybe you were punished for having needs. Understanding the root doesn't adjust the pattern, but it helps you have a compassion for yourself as you change it. Here's how to start saying no. First, practice with low-stake case situations. Someone asks if you want coffee but you don't. Say, no thank you. That's it. No elaborate excuse. No apology. Just a simple, polite no. Notice what happens. Probably nothing dramatic. The world doesn't end. People don't hate you. This builds evidence that saying no is safe. Next, increase the stakes gradually. Can you work late? Not tonight. Can you lend me money? That doesn't work for me. Each time you say no and survive, you build confidence. Here's a trick: when someone asks something and you're not sure, buy time. Let me check my schedule and get back to you. This prevents automatic yes responses and gives you space to consider what you actually want. Another technique: offer an alternative if you want to. I can't help you move on Saturday, but I'm free Sunday morning for TV hours. This shows you care while respecting your limits. But remember, you're not obligated to offer alternatives. No is a complete sentence. The hardest part of breaking people's depression is tolerating disapproval. Some people will be upset when you start setting boundaries. Be benefited from your lack of them. Let them be upset. Their disappointment is not your emergency. One of my favorite quotes: you can be the ripest, hugest bitch in the world, and there will still be people who don't like bitches. You cannot please everyone. Trying to do so guarantees you lose yourself. Staying connected without losing yourself. Here's the fear that stops people from setting boundaries: if I say no, people will leave. I prioritize myself, I'll end up alone. This fear is understandable but mostly false. Healthy boundaries don't destroy relationships. They transform them into something real. Think about it: do you respect people who have no boundaries, who never say no, who always accommodate? Maybe you feel sorry for them. Maybe you even take advantage of them. But do you respect them? Probably not. And they probably don't respect themselves either. Now think about people who have clear boundaries. They know what they will and won't do. They communicate directly. They respect themselves. How do you feel about them? If you're healthy, you respect them. You know where you stand with them. There is no gossiping, no walking on eggshells, no hidden resentment. Boundaries create clarity. And clarity creates safety. When people know your limits, they can rely. They're not worried about accidentally crossing a line because you have drawn the line clearly. My friend Eileen is a perfect example. She has a strict boundary about work-life balance. She doesn't check emails after 6 p.m. or on weekends. When she first set this boundary at her job, she worried she'd be seen as uncommitted. The opposite happened. Her colleagues respected her more. They planned better. They stopped sending last-minute requests because they couldn't say without respond. And during work hours, she was fully present and productive. Here's the key: boundaries allow you to show up more fully in your relationships. When you're not resentful, exhausted, or drained, you have more to give. You're more present, more generous, more authentic. Think of it like the airplane organ mask rule, put yours on first before helping others. This isn't selfish, it's necessary. You can't support others if you're suffocating. So how do you stay connected while maintaining boundaries? First, communicate the WHE behind your boundaries when appropriate. I need alone time on Sunday mornings because it recharges me for the week, helps people understand it's not rejection, it's self-care. Second, honor other people's boundaries too. If you want your limits respected, respect theirs. This creates mutual respect and models healthy relationship dynamics. Third, be present when you are available. If you set a boundary that you're only available for certain times, be fully there during those times. Quality matters more than quantity. An hour of genuine connection beats 10 hours of resentful obligation. Fourth, check in with yourself regularly. Boundaries aren't fixed forever. They shift as circumstances change. Maybe you need more alone time during stressful periods. Maybe you can be more available during pagefulness. Stay flexible and aware. The confidence that comes from boundaries. When you consistently maintain boundaries, something shifts inside you. You start to feel different. More grounded. More secure. This is confidence, not arrogance, but quiet self-awareness. Confidence comes from self-trust. And you build self-trust by keeping promises to yourself. Every time you honor a boundary, you're telling yourself, I matter. My needs matter. I can trust myself to protect me. This accumulates over time into an unshakable sense of worth. I set to seek validation constantly. I needed others to approve of me to feel okay. But as I practiced boundaries, something changed. I started validating myself. When I honored my need for rest, I validated that my well-being matters. When I said no to something that didn't align with my values, I validated my integrity. Slowly, I needed eternal approval less and less. This doesn't mean you become isolated or arrogant. It means you become free. Free to connect authentically because you're not desperately seeking approval. Free to love generously because you're not running on empty. Free to be yourself because you're not contorting to fit others' expectations. People sense this confidence. They're drawn to it. Ironically, when you stop trying so hard to be liked, more people genuinely like you. Because they're meeting the real you, not a people-pleasing performance. Boundaries in different contexts. Boundaries look different in different relationships. With family, you might need boundaries around personal topics, visits, or unsolicited advice. With friends, around time, emotional energy, or reciprocity. With romantic partners, around personal space, communication styles, or expectations. At work, around availability, workload, or professional distance. The principles remain the same, but the application varies. With family, boundaries can be especially hard because of history, obligation, and guilt. But they're also especially necessary because family patterns are deeply ingrained. With friends, boundaries preserve the friendship. If you're always available, always accommodating, resentment builds and the friendship dies slowly. Better to set boundaries and keep the friendship healthy. In romantic relationships, boundaries are the foundation of respect. Healthy couples have clear boundaries around individuality, communication, and needs. Codependent couples have blurred boundaries and suffocate each other. At work, boundaries protect